Welcome back to day 3. So now you know all about VA and VV support. Today we're going to look at how you might deliver that in a bit of a wider context, along with some clinical cases, clinically orientated talks as well. So the focus will be on mobile and networks. And just a housekeeping point before we get underway. Please make sure, all you candidates, that we have your TAM registration number and that you've signed in for every day. Otherwise, your CME, it'll be much, much harder for you to collect your CME points. So that's really just to help you guys out. Okay, so now I'd like to welcome Dr. Salman to give us the first talk of the day on ECMO networks. Dr. Salman is a cardiac critical care intensivist, and he's also co-chair of our ECMO task force. Dr. Salman.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning. Thank you, Dr. Mark, for the introduction. Thank you for the impressive organization of the workshop. I would like to thank all the faculties who came from United Kingdom, from Saudi Arabia, from other parts of United Arab Emirates to make this happening. So, I was not expecting that I'll be a speaker in this workshop, but, I was surprised with the agendas. My name was there, so I said, okay, let me talk about what's happening about the ECMO business here. And it was a surprising story for me also to be, in this field, because it happened all of a sudden. So I'll just shed light on what's happening about the ECMO in Abu Dhabi and what are the challenges, solutions, and how we do the networking in the future. With the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, so everyone was worried. And most of the worry was about the food, about the medicines for COVID-19, how people will get the appropriate treatment. And it was kind of not only an anxiety feeling, it was also a phobia. So our leadership by the President of United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, that time, he appeared in the media and sent assuring messages to the whole people in United Arab Emirates, which was, you are United Arab Emirates, you shouldn't worry about medicine, you shouldn't worry about food. And he said it in Arabic, لا تشيلون هم. So this message was assuring to everyone, and you have lived the situation. You have seen all the expensive medicines coming from abroad, and it was given for free for the COVID-19 patients regarding of the nationalities. So the directions of the Department of Health, so we started with food and we started with medicines. Why we don't extend it to more critical interventions, which is one of them is the ECMO. So ECMO during the COVID-19 pandemic was provided with no cost for the deserved patients upon the criteria. So we are one of the luckiest people in the world to live in United Arab Emirates because of the inspiring leadership. So I want to highlight what was the ECMO history. So in 2008, we had the first pediatric ECMO case in Sheikh Khalifa Medical City. In 2011, we had the first adult case in SKMC. And in 2015, the ECMO program has started in Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi for the adult patients, and later on in Burjeel Hospital. And so far, we have only one pediatric ECMO center in Sheikh Khalifa Medical City. Hopefully, we will have more centers, okay, for this purpose. Since 2013, we had more than 300 cases of ECMO runs, and this is going to be more. This was more with the COVID-19 wave that we had faced. So to study a phenomena, you should know also the geography, the history. It's like, Google map, Googling the problem, right? The map of United Arab Emirates, and specifically Abu Dhabi, I just looked at this, background in Wikipedia. So the area of Abu Dhabi itself is around 1,000 square kilometer, with a population of 1.5 million. That was in 2018. So probably we have more population right now. And I thought about where are the ECMO centers now? And you can see they're all located in the downtown, not anywhere else. And the second busy spot of medical practice is in Al Ain, and there is actually no ECMO center, right? So thinking about patients here is really made my hair white, right? So because how to cover all this area, and that was one of the challenges. I summarize the challenges of ECMO here. Some are logistic and mostly are economic, bottom line. So we want to talk about money. So the first discovered problem was no adequate supply during the active COVID-19 wave. It was actually global. It's not related to the place here. But we were part of the suffer. The cost of ECMO equipment and pharmaceuticals. ECMO care is more expensive than the non-ICU patients or the non-ECMO patients in the ICU. The retrieval personnel cost was not counted, so I would like to appreciate all those people who volunteered to cannulate and bring patients to the ECMO centers. The cost of rehabilitations after recovery, and the ECMO ICU patient care concept was not well established. So the solution came from the stakeholders. So I was invited by Dr. Saleh Al-Ali, the CEO of the CPR, just to think, how can we improve the ECMO program in Abu Dhabi? And that's why I spent more than 1.5 years putting all these together to find a better way to the best practice. So there are a lot of time-critical emergency programs here, including STEMI, stroke, sepsis, trauma, maternity complications, poisoning, and ECMO. So we included the ECMO within these packages in order to keep them on the priority in the healthcare system in Abu Dhabi. And the stakeholders, they suggested to form an ECMO program lead, okay, to make things easier for the healthcare centers. And that was run by experts from the most representative ECMO hospitals. And this is the path of when we started till now. So up to here, we are still trying to amend a lot of policies related to the ECMO practice. So the Undersecretary of the Department of Health had signed this as one of the emergency task force formations that we should initiate to help the people in the medical field. So this is the decision made by him, which is led by, Dr. Saleh Al-Ali, then me, and the remaining partners from Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi, VPS, from Saha as well. So how we agreed on structuring the leadership of the task force. So we have a chair and a co-chair, and we have made some important committees in order to improve the healthcare practice in ECMO. So quality committee, education committee, logistics and regulations, pediatrics, and we just included the research part in the education. This is a lot, okay? It's not only 4 sections, but we spend lots of time meeting and meeting and meeting to get, things better. And we reached to new task force responsibilities in order to have life easier for you when you are practicing ECMO. So probably you don't feel this, but in the future, in 1 year, most likely, things will get better and better. So we are setting quality, guidelines for the clinical practice in ECMO. And we are dealing with some logistics about licensing people or the ECMO professionals, including physicians, nurses, and perfusionists, reaching to who is well qualified to practice ECMO. It's not open shop, right? So those people, they should have the best education and clinical training to take care of ECMO patients. And we want to make sure that ECMO centers have appropriate licensing designation and criteria for doing ECMO. So you want to organize the service, and you don't want to have sad stories happening somewhere else with catastrophic complications because of no organization of the service. We were working also on the education and certified training, like this ECMO workshop for the pediatrics. And in the future, we are going to have a tele-ECMO program. So we will share experience. When you have a difficult question to answer, we can meet up, through tele-ECMO and discuss the case and come with appropriate answers for the puzzling cases. Also want to establish appropriate ECMO registry, which is we are lacking so far. So with the quality part, we are establishing an ECMO registry by 2023, and all the information should be fed to the Department of Health to make sure that we are doing very well. So this is the first ECMO workshop which was done in the Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi last year. Conference, actually this year, we're still in 2022. And it was very exciting, a lot of interaction and appreciation from the attendees. The feedback was so amazing, and we are working also on improving the quality of the workshops. Also continuing with the ECMO task force responsibilities. So we are working on releasing the ECMO fellowship program for adults in Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi. This will start by 2025, most likely. We are also advising on the insurance coverage and the financial issues of the ECMO. There are a lot of struggling points with the insurance policies, and we are amending the gaps to make it appropriate for the ECMO coverage. And this should be also including the ECPR program for out-hospital cardiac arrest in the future. So not only about hospital programs. We want also to resolve the problem about the ECMO supply. So beside your supply you are working on, we are preparing a proposal for national ECMO supply for the future. We don't want to struggle with some kind of emergencies, and the hospitals maybe are lacking a supply, so we make sure that things are ready. Coordination between the ECMO centers, the hospitals, the pre-hospital services, the cardiac programs, to make sure that all patients who are deserving the service will be in the loop. And also to have ECMO mobile team. So we had proposed for the first ground ambulance that is with a specification for the ECMO retrieval. And we are going to enhance the service with the helicopter and the medevac whenever possible. So ECMO networking, this will need 24-hour, 24/7 consultation service. And this will be through the medical emergency call center, which is at present is there, but there will be an advanced or a newly established emergency call center in the future. And retrieval service that should help also for bringing patients on ECMO from the referring hospitals. We are working on policies for the ECMO networking. We are having a new kind of connections with the emergency call centers for the immediate response from both sides. We are working on the consultation forms, the on-call schedule, and also the transportation mechanism. So we know that sometimes there are traffic in Abu Dhabi and some parts of the United Arab Emirates. So probably the less than 2 hours reachable distances will be covered by ground ambulance. Otherwise, it will be covered by helicopter for international, spots, retrievals. There will be a medevac. So to make this happening, we have to make very good relationship with the stakeholders in Department of Health, in the ECMO centers, with the CEOs, and we always highlight what is ECMO and what is the purpose of ECMO. We are activating this on frequencies, many frequencies, and of course, to make this happening, financial support. We have very good financial support from the leadership. Besides that, we are also working to correct the insurance policies. That will happen, definitely. And hopefully that will work, will make it easier for us in the future. So to get a consult, of course, we should have a call center. And the call center, they will refer to the, ECMO consultant on call. And after that, if the case is approved for retrieval, the team will move to the referring hospital, and the case will be retrieved to the ECMO centers here. International ECMO networking, yes, we have to work on it. So we have very good relationship with the SWAC also. So Dr. Vivek is representing us in the SWAC also here. And we have another representative here, okay. Sorry, I got your name. Suneel. He's also working with the SWAC also. So our message is, I think, is received now. So you must talk about Abu Dhabi. And we have very good relationship with the Saudi extracorporeal life support group. Actually, we are also having a very good bridge with the group in the Gulf, and to some extent in France, Canada as well, and we open up with the United States, Dr. Chris from United Kingdom. So we must build up this networking. This is a very healthy approach to enhance the experience from every side, looking to upgrading of the system. So having Dr. Chris coming to here, okay, will add a lot to this workshop, will add a lot of our thinking process. Things you don't know about is we are also working on a Gulf ECMO group, all right? So education group, So we are together in one boat. So we have the Gulf Countries Council, which is working long time. We have the manpower, we have the resources, we have the facilities. So time now to collaborate in different aspects of the healthcare system, including the ECMO. So we did our meeting, we did twice meetings actually, and we established the education group. And on the other hand, we are working on the Gulf ECMO clinical trial group. So it's the time for doing clinical research here. It's not only simple research, we have to do clinical, randomized control trials as well. Coming to the conclusion, so we know that ECMO is a life-saving for respiratory failure and circulatory failures. The ECMO practice is growing up. We have a vision as ECMO is one of the priorities here in Abu Dhabi. And retrieval programs for pediatrics is coming beside the adult program. And remember that we are also working in the Abu Dhabi ECMO networking to be more active. I'll leave you this. This is one of the past stories we achieved in Abu Dhabi for the first case retrieved during the COVID-19 patients. There are a lot of inspiring, things inside the video. And just leave it for you that, you just listen and enjoy it. Maybe you click.
When I visited the doctor, I was black out. So my sister, she came to hospital. She told me I spent in the hospital almost 2 months. I was start questioning myself, am I in prison? Am I in hospital? Where am I? So I was alone there. My name is Nafi Mtumba. I'm a Ugandan. I'm working in the UAE as a taxi driver for 5 years. We don't allow the passengers to sit in front because they were supposed to be sitting on the back seats. So some of the passengers, they don't accept to sit in back seats. So by that time, you never know. I got a disease from there.
Nafi had been affected by COVID quite badly. And despite all the best efforts that the doctors there had made, Nafi seemed to make no progress and he was in quite a bad shape. We went there with the whole team. We put him on ECMO and brought him back here.
When I initially saw him, he was still very weak. He had generalized muscle weakness. He was not able to mobilize without help. He was requiring help with the activities of daily living, and he was also on dialysis. He was still taking a lot of effort and his breathing was not so good.
The time I saw my brother in this hospital, he was in ICU. He was in coma. I couldn't even look at him because I was so nervous. In fact, I couldn't recognize him for the first time.
I didn't know that I was in a Cleveland clinic. So when I realized that I'm in a Cleveland clinic, I started thinking that how am I going to manage to pay this hospital?
Initially, when the COVID-19 crisis started, we were deemed as the center of excellence for advanced therapy for the viral pneumonia. At that point, we acquired the most number of machines that would be needed to place patients on veno-venous ECMO. This patient was our first retrieval in the system. The government helped us set up the system, the government helped us execute it, and of course, the government took care of all the expenses for this gentleman throughout the process, from the other hospital, transportation to us, and then his recovery while he's been at Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi.
Each doctor come to me is like my brother. They are giving me a courage to become. They are only telling that, no, you are okay. It's the doctor, they are saying I'm okay. Let me continue, I'll be fine. So that's why people, all the people, they say, I'm looking like a sick, but I'm not a sick.
I'm very pleased to report that he has progressively improved. He has become stronger day by day. And at current time, he is now able to walk by himself. He is able to look after himself. He can go to bathroom by himself. He's self-feeding. He's eating normally. He is engaging very well in conversation day to day. He's emotionally very settled and very happy and very pleased with his recovery.
The intensive care specialist, such as myself, who's also an expert on ECMO therapy, is like the conductor of this orchestra, overseeing, coordinating, and fine-tuning every aspect of care so that we can steer the patient from disease to health. It was remarkable that in Nafi's case, we were able to put together all of this in a very good way so that Nafi could make it, because we know that patients with Nafi's level of illness do not have good outcomes overall. But Nafi actually did make it through.
Cleveland Clinic, they are so thankful. You people have done a very good job. Even the government of UAE, they've tried hard. You've helped us. I think my brother by this time could be not here.
When I think about the journey that Mr. Mutombo endured in Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, I am extremely proud of the efforts put to save his life.
The doctors, thank you so much. I really appreciate for the work they have done to me to make my life back. So I'm very happy in my life.
Okay, so there are a lot of inspiring messages, right? So number one, governmental support. Okay, they never kept people alone during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was, unlimited. And number two, an integrated healthcare system to save lives, including retrieval, ICU care, rehabilitation, and number three, Nafi, he's back to work, right? So this time when you go for a taxi, avoid Uber and look for the usual taxi, look for Nafi. So you might find him, somewhere he's working. And this is very, actually I'm very happy that he's back to work, he's back to normal status, functional status to support his families in Uganda as well. So we need to speak about our achievements. If you want to shout in the dark, living with ECMO problems, this is up to you. But you should reflect your positive experience in a good way in the social media. So messages will be delivered to the stakeholders and to the leaders in United Arab Emirates, and they have immediate response. So for this workshop, it was just one phone call and this thing's happening, right? So we are supporting you. Just make sure that we are supporting you, but we need to do the best orchestrating system to the ECMO practice here. And remember that in 2023, we have basic adult ECMO workshops. We have comprehensive ECMO workshop for adults. We have 2 pediatric ECMO workshops. And the big event is the ECMO conference in May. So hopefully we will see you all together there. Thank you very much.
We've got some time for questions, if anybody has questions for Dr. Salman, before we move on to the next talk.
I have some questions. First, I must say, I'm happy that the program is going to be developed because UAE is a modern country, Abu Dhabi is a fantastic town, and it fits to the town, this. But I'm coming from Germany, and so I know some problems that we can have in this field. Number one is there must be clear contraindication, because every patient that is very sick, almost dying, can get the ECMO. So we need 20 doctors that are able to do this if we want to do that.
Yeah.
So, and then you can sometimes, it is done knowing very well that you are just delaying the death. You cannot save some people, so it is legally better if you die 3 days later. This is ethically, financially, morally wrong. So it should be very clear. If I see there 724, that somebody is there able to take the patient, to give some information, it is very difficult to find the indication of this. It is not a Filipino sitting there cannot do this. It is very difficult to make an indication to say this can be done. You say we have a lot of money for this. Okay. Yes, let me just finish. One second. My question, I'm telling about the problem. I'm not against this. I'm just telling about some problem that you may answer or not. So this is other things is you say we have much money, but money are not people. People, we need a lot of people to do this. And then what happens in Europe is the cardiac people that are many times used for this don't want to take the ECMO of other specialties because they would stop their own job. So that is called in the cardiac places post-cardiac cardiopulmonary support, just because they cannot take this over. Yeah. I'm not against this. I'm only very open, very sincerely. I want to say the problem that we could find. And I hope that we think about this, we find a solution. I'm not against this.
Yeah.
That's all. Sorry.
All right. So I'm very transparent in my answers, along with your messages. Number one, because, you know, as a cardiac intensivist, I don't use ECMO just for completion of the process of death, just to make some people happy. This is an invasive procedure. There are absolute indications and contraindications. We are sticking to the guidelines. And actually, they are integrated in the new policy of ECMO referrals. So, number one. Number two, that's why we are saying there should be licensing for the ECMO centers. And also there should be adequate registry input from them, and we check on the details of the cases. Nobody will do cosmetic ECMO deployment, right? It should be absolutely indicated. Otherwise, no. Those centers who are having this practice, they will not exist. Take it from me. Okay? Number one. And number two is for having, you know, the ECMO cannulation. I'm not sure if you are living in Abu Dhabi or not. So most of the ECMO cannulations are done by intensivists here. All right? Some are done by the cardiac surgeons, but mostly they are done by our intensivists. Actually, we are going to have, we already have 3 in the, 1 in the United States and 2 in McGill's University. They are studying ECMO fellowship. And we are expecting them to come after 1 or 2 years, and they will be added to the group as well. So we are focusing on training people to come and work with us. So this is this is the last day of the ECMO conference, and many people were in the photo. We are missing some. They are leaving United Arab Emirates, and some of them are coming. So last year, the event was full house, and we are expanding this year. So the ECMO and the trauma conferences together, we are targeting to host more than 1,000 attendees. So we are growing up. Hopefully to see you there in May 2023, okay, with new concepts, new ideas, new speakers, and hopefully you will enjoy it.
Any other questions? Okay, right, here we are, Dr. Benedict.
Morning, I'm Benedict. I'm a pediatric cardiac surgeon at SKMC along with my friends Alexander, Juan. And as you know, we are the largest and biggest center for pediatric cardiac surgery. And alhamdulillah, we don't have too many ECMOs now. What I would like to ask you is, considering the small population of UAE, how many ECMOs do we expect in a year? And based on that, you will be allocating your funds for that, because all the funds will not come from insurance. Are we addressing that in today's? Okay.
Pab, could I take this question? Yeah. So part of the pediatric subcommittee of the task force work before we got going was to do a survey amongst the neonatal units about babies who could potentially have used ECMO. So, and we didn't manage to reach out to every neonatal unit in Abu Dhabi, but we identified at least 12 children in the last year who could have benefited and did not get offered ECMO. So that's probably an underestimate. And we're only talking about neonates here needing respiratory support. So it may be about 15 a year in the first place, and that's babies alone. And then there's the pediatric group. What happens with ECMO, and we'll probably hear more about this from our subsequent speakers, is once you establish the service and you educate your referral base, the numbers increase. So this is not an exercise in producing a big system to serve very, very few numbers. And every baby that we can save is vitally important. That's the other thing to say. We have the skills. And as you just pointed out, we're doing less ECMO runs because we've got a very skilled cardiac surgical team. So there is a gap. There is a gap at SKMC this year already in terms of ECMO provision that we're hoping to fill with respiratory cases. Okay. So
the other part of your question is we are focusing in enhancing the system or improving the system of retrieval for neonates and pediatrics in Abu Dhabi first. And then we'll start covering or supporting the other parts of United Arab Emirates, especially the northern part, because Dr. Jihad is from Al-Jalila. They are covering Dubai area. Unless they need some help for retrieval, we can do the cannulation, for example, and retrieve the cases to Al-Jalila, right? So it's kind of collaborative system. We are going to help people in the future, and just want to make sure that things are running in the right way, and then we'll move on.
Very much, Dr. Salman. So on to our next speaker, Dr. Chris Harvey. So for newcomers to for our surgical and anaesthetic colleagues, to introduce Chris, he's the director of ECMO in Leicester, Glenfield, which is a very big centre, and we are benefiting greatly from his experience. So here he's going to talk to us now about transports.
Hello again. Yeah, as Mark says, I'm going to speak about mobile ECMO. So the ECMO service in Leicester started back in 1989. We're the first centre in the UK. And until this date, we're the only centre in the UK that is formally commissioned by the government to provide ECMO for every age group, from neonates through peds to adults. Since we started in 1989, we've treated over 2,500. I think it's about 2,700 now. And at the start of the service, we'd go out, grab the patient, bring them back, whether that be the ECMO fellows doing it or pediatric intensivists. And we did very well, considering these patients were very sick. We had some deaths in transfer. I was unlucky enough that my first transfer, the patient died, so I had 100% mortality for a little while. It's come down a lot since then. But every year, we had a couple of patients that we had conversations with. We knew of their existence, and the referrers would say, are you going to come and put them on ECMO? Yeah, we'll take them, but we'll have to move them to Leicester. Or no, they said, far too sick for that, we're not interested, and put the phone down. Not sure why, because usually those patients would die. At least we offered them some hope. But it was a perceived thing that these patients couldn't be transported conventionally. So why do we do mobile ECMO? It's not simply because we can. We've had that thrown at us in the UK. We're the only centre doing mobile ECMO for paediatrics and neonates. And it is not the easiest thing to achieve. But usually it's all down to patient factors. So you've got severe hypoxia, acidosis, massive inotropic requirements, and just general instability of your patients. The other reason is you can't replicate the treatment. You might have a patient who's relatively stable, in the loosest sense of the term, on high frequency, who you put on conventional ventilation and they deteriorate rapidly. Now, there are ventilators you can do high frequency on the back of an ambulance, but they're very power hungry and you need a lot of oxygen. So it's all right, a short trip, 20 minutes across the city, but if you're going 2-3 hours, they're no good at all. And also, we needed to step one step ahead. I'm assuming it's the same across in the United Arab Emirates, but certainly neonatal intensive care in the UK in the last 10, 15 years has come on leaps and bounds. They do an awful lot more to these babies, so therefore the babies we used to get for ECMO are now surviving without ECMO, and the ones that are coming for ECMO are that bit sicker. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was very little nitric oxide use. Inotropes were limited to dopamine, dobutamine. Surfactant wasn't used, and a lot of the babies were poisoned with a drug called tolazoline, which just caused massive vasodilatation and dropped the blood pressure. So we needed something as the ECMO centre to keep one step ahead of these sicker babies. Other things to think about is longer distance transfers. Again, your short conventional trip might be all right. And in the UK, a fairly small country, and Leicester, if you don't know where it is, if you draw the central point of the UK, that's pretty much where we are. So we're well placed to cover the whole country. There isn't a good supply of aircrafts in the UK. We've got no need. We've got motorways running up just about everywhere, so flights are often difficult. In the adult world, the ECMO service came into fruition after swine flu in 2011, and it became a standard that all adult centres had to do mobile ECMO. So there are no contraindications to mobile ECMO, only ECMO itself. And I think that list is changing all the time and getting less and less. We will move patients with open chests, we'll move them on VA, we'll move them VV, we'll do anything. And the mode of ECMO should be decided on the patient's needs, not on the fact that you're going to do mobile ECMO. You shouldn't put somebody VA just because you're doing mobile ECMO, if VV would be the better mode. The other thing to remember is that not all patients need mobile ECMO. If you've got a patient that you can have an early conversation with, who's getting worse slowly, move them to the ECMO centre at that point. They don't have to be put on ECMO. They can wait, see, there might be some little tricks that that centre can do to improve things without using ECMO. And the other concept we come across is the time to ECMO is important. So it might be better to do a short, high-risk transfer where you can get onto ECMO in half an hour, rather than waiting on the mobilisation of your ECMO team, which might take 4 hours. That kid will become more stable quicker with a short trip. The classic for us is lots of hospitals in London, 5 minutes away from Great Ormond Street by road, yet whereas will we drive 2 hours down to London to put the patient on ECMO? Far quicker just to put them in the back of the ambulance and get them on than using us. There are risks involved. You can have all the risks you know about an ECMO, but in the back of the ambulance, which makes it more fun. So your equipment can fail, you can get air entrainment, you can get bleeding. When you're putting the patient on, the staff are usually very helpful and very interested in what you're doing, but might not have seen an ECMO cannulation before. And you can't take your whole theatre staff, your intensive care, your anaesthetists in the back of the ambulance. You're limited really to about 3 people. You can't take all your equipment. If I go into our storeroom in Glenfield, I've got just about every cannula known to man. I can't carry all them. I've got to be a bit selective in what I take. When you move patients, things can fall out. I've had a number of vehicle failures. This wasn't me, but the University of Michigan lost a whole ECMO team into Lake Michigan when the plane crashed. I have had some scary moments in planes where undercarriage hasn't come down, or helicopter fire engine warning lights have come on, and emergency landings in the snow, crashed into hospitals and ambulances. So all sorts of things. I can tell you lots of stories about things going badly wrong. Not badly wrong, because I'm here, but slightly wrong. And then, as I said, all the things of ECMO. Mobile ECMO isn't new. This is me doing my first mobile ECMO back in 2004. And back then we were doing elective transfer. So the child who was on ECMO in our institution, and we needed to take them for transplant assessment. So you had a day or two to plan it, get everybody ready, and off we go. Some teams go back as far as the 90s, and there's various solutions that I've come across. You can't talk mobile ECMO without talking about the Karolinska in Sweden. These guys are completely bonkers, but in a good way. They developed a mobile ECMO very early because Sweden, well, it's just working, enormous, great big country, population widely spread, and they would just go and get the patients, put them on ECMO and move them. So they were doing it even with roller pumps, and these were incredibly heavy, lots of batteries. One of their lead clinicians is a guy called Michael Broman, who's very big, and actually if you see him in his scrubs, he often has to cut the arms up because he gets his Arnold Schwarzenegger style muscles in. And I made the mistake of lifting this out thinking I was doing the helpful thing, and sort of collapsed, and my knees are doing this as I loaded it to the ground. And Inga, the big 6-foot tall blonde nurse, said, "Oh, you must be incredibly strong. Not even Michael will try and lift that on his own." And I never did that again. Yeah, crazy. It's cold in Sweden, especially compared to the United Arab Emirates. Why bother getting out your ambulance into the plane? Just drive your ambulance back on, complete on the plane. Here it might be the different story. It might be too hot to get out the ambulance, so just drive onto the plane. Why have an ambulance at all? Go with a bus. So this is their ECMO bus, much bigger, they've got more space, they go longer distances, and just once the patient's on ECMO, they're stable, go as far as you like. To show you how dedicated and what a fantastic team they are, they once had a woman, been on ECMO, I think for a couple of months, who was getting sicker. She wasn't going to survive, they were fairly confident of that. And this woman wanted to go back home to her garden to have a cup of tea. So they got in the ambulance, drove 400 miles, sat in her garden for half an hour, had a cup of tea and a slice of cake, and then got back in the ambulance and drove her home. So that's dedication for you. So I think they were out for about 16 hours all told. The downside with these bigger systems is you get this. This is what we call the Swedish anaconda. And if they're short of beds in Sweden, they'll drop patients off with us. So you've got your patient here, and then you've got ECMO circuit, goes round and up and round and down. And that's because they can't lift the circuit and the patient together, too heavy. So they'll have that long circuit stays on the runway, load the patient into the plane, then the circuit follows. This guy had a Pseudomonas pneumonia, came across for ECMO, got better, went back, then was in Sweden for about 12 hours, then came back to us for a second run, and he enjoyed that. They also hold the record for the longest transfer, which is a guy they picked up in Alexandria, took him back to Stockholm for ECMO. He was originally from Australia, all funded through insurance. His insurance company was saying, well, can we not get him home? Because healthcare in Sweden is quite expensive. So they then said, yeah, not a problem, and flew him all the way down to Perth. Americans, like lots of people when they're doing mobile ECMO, and like to wear camouflage. Personally, I prefer scrubs. You do not need military uniforms and medals to do mobile ECMO, but there is a little girl there and surrounded by people. You can have trucks for ECMO. You can buy ECMO solutions now. This one was made in Hawaii. Again, long distance off the mainland, put patients on ECMO and then move them to the mainland hospitals. Works quite nicely. Although this whole thing is over 200 kilos, which is all right with a little kid on the top, but if you've got a big, Hawaiian man, it would be incredibly heavy. So when we started doing ECMO, we said, well, what we're going to do? Well, most of ours are going to be by road. We're not a big company, we're centrally located. So let's stick to what we know and put the Levotronic system on a trolley. It's very low power consumption. The only thing that really draws any power is your heater cooler. All told, you've got about 300 watts. The heater cooler is very on and off, so you get big power drains. And we was backed up with Joshua, so we got our own ambulance, and this was certainly the most powerful ambulance designed in Europe. We went way over the top on the specs. Had its own generator, had additional batteries, upgraded alternator, and if all went wrong, we had a big longer cable that we could just knock on somebody's door and say, can we plug in for half an hour while we recharge everything? But it worked most of the time. Because it was so heavy, it had a habit of blowing up. This was one day down by Bristol, where the engine just went bang and the front windscreen just went covered in oil, a bit like you see in the cartoons. So we had to pull over. We had a nice picnic next to the field, and Bristol kindly sent us out another ambulance to go and collect the patient. And I became an expert in mechanics. The lift at the back for putting the patients in was always breaking, so quite often you could see me opening up these panels here and doing my advanced hydraulic engineering. There were some dark holes you had to put your hands in and pump it. We've done flights before. This is the rescue helicopters that we used. They were replaced by these, which Sikorsky S-92, I think. Bigger, faster, more comfortable, but more expensive. We used the little air ambulances. This is too small to get an ECMO patient in, but it was a great way of getting the team around. So we would turn up, that's a helipad just outside the hospital, jump in the helicopter, fly the patient, put them on ECMO, by which point our ambulance would come and pick us up and bring us home. They've now upgraded that to a slightly bigger version, so this is the Augusta 169, which has the space to take 4 personnel and a patient on ECMO. So now we can fly around. So this is run by charities just for children. So it's very good, and we like it because it's actually cheap. Well, it's free to us to use. That's our helicopter-based system. So you've got the Levotronics with it's a Chalice oxygenator on a pump, all based on a frame which then just clips to the bottom of the bed. So basically it renders the Levotronics as portable as your Centra Mag. We do fixed-wing aircraft, mainly to Northern Ireland, places like that. Now this is a very small plane, and the problem with very small planes is they can often be finely balanced. So we just loaded all our kit into the boot area, and I jumped on, and I'm not small, and the plane did a wheelie. So the front end of the plane kicked off, back end of the plane hit the ground, and that upset the pilots. So I now know to wait till all the team is up the front of the wing before I get on, and I actually just stand somewhere off the side there with my shoulder underneath to make sure it doesn't happen. We can use fancy planes, so we don't often get new ones. This was only about 6 months old. Really nice inside and very fast. We use big planes. So this was a British citizen who was out in Afghanistan doing some private security work, and he got influenza B, and they put him on ECMO and then insisted on flying him over to us. So we got a call, it's about 3 days before we actually arrived, to say, could they bring him? We said yes. A lot of logistics involved, but they said they needed to bring 17 people from Birmingham Airport to our hospital. So we sent them Joshua, our ambulance, and the easiest way to do it was to hire a minibus. So I was the minibus driver this day. I'm sitting in the minibus taking the picture. This is them, again, as Americans do, camouflage, taking the patient out. And for helping with this mission, we all got medals. Now, when we got to the hospital, they all marched through, all in a line with the patient, got the patient onto the bed space, and they had a ridiculously long circuit. So I immediately took clamps and scissors and chopped it down. And the guy who had been running the transport was rather horrified that the taxi driver had just attacked the circuit with scissors. All in all, this transport was about 2 million or 8 million dirham. And we went even bigger plane. So that was a Hercules. This is even bigger still. This is an A400M. And this was our solution during COVID. So you had plenty of room. This is one of my intensive care colleagues, just for scale. And the reason why is the smaller aircraft wouldn't fly with COVID positive patients. So you had all the pilots up the front, and there was one nurse from the RAF who would help, and we'd load them on. And we moved 4 patients like this, and it was a cost of 752,000. Fortunately, all 4 survived, so that's okay. We've been stranded before, so this was when I went out to move a child from London out to Hanover in Germany for a lung transplant. None of the UK centres would touch him, but somehow they got agreement that Hanover had listed him as long as we could get him there, and we missed our flight window home by about 5 minutes, so I had to have a night in the hotel. My nurse was in a nursing uniform, I was in scrubs, and they thought we were just at some fancy dress party. And this one, sadly, we got out and the patient died. We had an aircraft coming to pick us up from Europe, and we couldn't justify the expense of just coming to pick the team up. So we ended up having a night in a hotel and then getting a standard flight back. So who do we take? We don't have a set team. It's more about fulfilling every role we need. So you need some form of doctor trained in critical care transport and ECMO. You need somebody, a nurse trained in intensive care, ECMO, and what we added was scrubbing. And that's had a knock-on effect. It makes our mobile ECMOs easier because they're happy with the instruments, they're happy assisting with the cannulation, but also if we've got an arrest on the unit, they're happy to assist with opening chests, and they're happy to do everything. So it's as well as helping the ECMO service, it's getting rid of any delays in cracking on and opening chests. And you need somebody with some surgical skills. Now, and there's another one, there's the perfusionists. I get upset if I forget them. And I'll fill all 4 of those roles at some point in time. We've got surgeons who can do the intensive care. We've got 1 or 2 nurses who could pretty much do the perfusion role. And it's about getting that balance of the team as to what the patient needs. This is one of our transport nurses. This is just emphasizing it's a chest reopening, and they're only too happy to lend a hand until the proper theatre team comes in. So, as I say, it's not without problems. I've touched on a few of them that we've had. So one issue is you turn up and all the unit there disappear. Think, just let's leave you to get on with it. You don't need to worry about it, and they all run away. And you're left looking around for bits and pieces. Or you get the other extreme, where everybody in the hospital wants to come and see what's going on. They've heard something exciting's happening, and you've got to sort of squeeze past 3 or 4 people to get anywhere near the baby. We have forgot vital bits of equipment, like the ECMO cannulas before. But I'm a great believer that there's this all-powerful ECMO God somewhere in the sky who looks down on you. And I'll say it was the VV ECMO cannulas, and this is a child who I was going to put VV. We forgot them, so I then had to put him VA, and he'd had an indwelling Hickman line. He was a patient post-bone marrow transplant. And I think if I had pushed hard with a VV cannula, I would have torn something nasty, and it would have ended in a disaster. But as it was, the VA cannulas went in all right, and it was probably his mode. As I say, we crashed into Sheffield Children's Hospital, did some good bit of damage to the ambulance, taking the patient into Great Ormond Street in the middle of the night. 3-way tap fell off as we were coming out of the lift. Bit of blood, clamped off, put new 3-way tap on. No big drama, patient was all right. But then we put the wheels of the trolley through the pool of blood, which then covered that blood. It's surprising how a little pool of blood, how much you can paint. You know, if the paint manufacturers could only make it work like that, it'd be great. And if that had been in our hospital, you would have come back the next morning and there'd still be traces of it. After we'd handed over, we walked out and it had all gone. So the cleaning squad had been in. We were landed in the snow. This was because we couldn't see anything. So we abandoned ship there and had to walk out with the patient across a field. And this was my latest little hiccup. We were taking the patient out, and we'd left the priming line on the circuit as a way of giving additional fluid. And that was unfortunately got caught on this thing here. Now, usually what happens in them circumstances is it just pulls the pigtail off. This actually snapped the lure lock connector. So I quickly had to grab it, put my finger on, and then chop into the circuit in the back of the ambulance and put a new connector in. You know, again, it wasn't as dramatic as that, but the ambulance driver still talks about that day and the 4 hours it took to clean all the blood out of all these little cracks and corners and stuff like that. There's no limit to the patients you can do. I've shown you a picture of this guy. This is our biggest at 237 kilos. Again, did mobile with ECMO with him, no bother. And that's the sort of numbers we've done. Up until beginning of September, we've probably done another 12 patients since then. So 236 neonates, 122 peds, and 400 adults. So fairly big number. I think there's potentially only the Swedes who I've mentioned who've done significantly more. They're running around about the 1,000 patient mark. And you can see, once you get started, people get wind of it, and all very quickly your numbers rise. But fortunately, we've plateaued at about the 65, 70 retrievals a year. And this is what happens. So this is me on a Friday night. Wanted to be watching the telly, but we'll get a call from Northern Ireland. So this is where we are in Leicester. Northern Ireland's up here. Dispatched the aircraft, picked the team up, and you get a nice winchman. They're usually very friendly and only too keen to do anything. And rather than flying all the way to Northern Ireland in a Wanner, we flew over to Wales, where that helicopter disappeared. We got a second helicopter. That helicopter wouldn't start, so we got a third helicopter. They made us dress up in some rather fancy gear, just in case we crashed into the Irish Sea, which is very cold. We got a different winchman, and we got a pilot who you may recognize. Fairly famous. He's bumped up the line of extension, so he's more famous. And we also got a very mean-looking guy with a big machine gun. Something to do with this pilot here being a bit special. So he flew us to there. I would like to say he landed. He kind of hovered and threw us out because apparently his family, who live down here, don't get on with the people in Ireland very well and haven't done for many years. So he wanted to get off to the safety of his base and hide until we were ready for the child. And this is a child we went out to, so a 5-day-old, born in very poor condition, found to have SVT with a heart rate of over 300, given inotropes, had actually been cooled to 32 degrees, adrenaline, milrinone, vasopressin, and still had almost an unrecordable blood pressure. Had been anuric for many hours, lactate was unrecordable, it had had multiple failed attempts at central cannulation by the referring team for a central line, and had a big hematoma over its right neck. I almost turned around and went away and said, no, come on, this is unsurvivable. But then I thought, I'm just the transport service. Newcastle, in the north of England, they wanted him, they're the cardiac experts, why not? So we cannulated for VA, got some blood pressure, actually rewarmed him up to 34 because it was about -2 out and about, it was a cold night. Got back in, went back to the helicopter. Now, usually would rendezvous, but the pilot decided he wanted us back at the takeoff point before he would come out of hiding. So I had a rather unfortunate one. I was just weaning the inotropes, bent forward, and caught the release toggle on my life jacket, and they don't tell you that it goes up with a bit of a bang, especially if you've got a big silly helmet on. So, yeah. So, fun night, and then we got to fly across to Newcastle with the patient, dropped them off, the helicopter disappeared, and then we got a taxi, 180 miles back down to Leicester. And this is why you do it. So this was the same child, about 2 months of age. Other than still being slow to feed and on NG feed, she made a full recovery, neurologically intact. So that was a fun night. Yeah. Okay, any questions? I think I've gone over a bit, sorry.
Thanks for that. We got a question.
Dr. Alexander, SKMC, Pediatric Cardiac Surgeon. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. Question, you reported 236 neonatal ECMOs. The first question, do you have a cardiac program for neonatals in your hospital? And the second, what is the main reason for this ECMO in this group?
Yeah, so that's 236 mobile ECMOs, not 236 ECMOs. We've done an awful lot more ECMOs. And yes, we do have a neonatal cardiac program, and the main reason for those referrals is basically meconium aspiration, sepsis, and diaphragmatic hernia, and there'll be a few other odds and sods, but that will cover more than 90% of the diagnoses.
In a diaphragmatic hernias group?
We're running anywhere between 60 and 65%.
Survival, right? And do you manage this patient by general surgeons in your hospital, or what? How this process is organized in your hospital? You need to repair this first or second, I don't know.
I'm going to leave that question because I know after the break we've got a talk specifically on diaphragms, and I'm sure it'll be answered. If it isn't, we can answer it then. But or I can talk this afternoon.
Okay. Any more questions for Chris? I'd like to ask, when it came to that with a cervical hematoma, did you still manage to get in through the neck?
Yeah, it was like a sprinkler, though, a garden sprinkler, once I opened it up. And it was, which was the biggest hole with the highest velocity of blood, and just poking it through, but it wasn't fun. And I did make the comment about 6 months after, like, I thought the intensivist had used a sewing machine to try and puncture the vessel. There were so many holes, not realizing that the intensivist was in the audience. So he had a word with us afterwards, but he saw the funny side, so I was all right. Good. And I was bigger than him.
Any other questions? Right. Thank you very much. Our next speaker I'd like to introduce is Suneel Pooboni. Suneel and I worked together in Leicester with Chris, but originally MD in Chandigarh, and then Fellowship in Sick Children's in Toronto, and then in Leicester, and then Birmingham Children, sorry, and then out here to Dubai, and he has a chair in pediatrics at the Mohammed bin Rashid University in Dubai. He's also, and he's a bit of a legend really in ECMO circles, he was president of ELSO SWAC from 2013 to 2016 and was instrumental really in bringing ECMO to India. So, Suneel, thank you.
Thanks, Mark, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. So, I will take you through the global scenario where we stand from ELSO point of view. Can we dim the light slightly, please? Thank you. I have no financial disclosures to make. Today in this talk, as Mark asked me to look at our situation in the global scenario, I will talk about establishment of SWAC ELSO. As you all know, SWAC stands for South Asia, West Asia chapter of ELSO. I will tell you how it has all started. In 2015, we were asked to look after Africa region as well. So then it became SWAAC ELSO. Then the objectives and what are our member countries here, the progress we have made so far, little bit focus on the conferences and our vision to take it forward. As I always say, we stand on the shoulders of our great visionaries who have led us to this stage from the inception of cardiopulmonary bypass circuit initially in 1950s and to heparin discovery by J. McLean and our father of ECMO, Bob Bartlett, who has been a focus for us and a leading pioneer in the field of ECMO as well. Here you can see the logos of ELSO, Central ELSO here, and this is when we started in 2013. This was our logo in with regards to SWAC ELSO, SWAAC, and when Africa was added, this was changed to the second one you are seeing over there. And this is the first picture of SWAC ELSO, not SWAC, sorry, ELSO, Central ELSO in 1989. When Bob showed the interest in establishing ELSO, all similar-minded individuals in the world, they got together and they established the ELSO chapter in 1989. Incidentally, that was the same year I was a fellow in Pennsylvania Hospital, Philadelphia. That was the time I got exposed to the first case of ELSO. I never knew it will become part of my life afterwards. But in 89 again, that was the same year I got exposed to ECMO. And over here is the Bob as the father of ELSO, ECMO. The objectives of ELSO mainly are to provide global leadership with respect to the ECMO through innovation, adequacy and advancing knowledge, advocate for patients, families and centers to improve the access, quality and outcomes of ECLS, that provide data for the clinical research, quality improvement and benchmarking for centers. So we took it forward as one of the chapters of ELSO. Here is a word about ECMO Society of India. As similar-minded individuals in India, we got together in 2010 and established a center in Mumbai in the name of ECMO Society of India. Our vision was mainly to promote knowledge of ECMO, train people and make sure it is done as per the ethical teaching practice. We have grown in the last 12-13 years now. These were the initial years when we were doing training programs in India. Steve Conrad and Peter Rikas, you see over here, they have been very helpful for us. They came to India and they have been participating in our training programs as faculty. And at this time, ELSO was thinking of establishing chapters in other parts of the world other than United States and Europe. So Latin American ELSO, SWAC ELSO, and Asia Pacific ELSO. These were the other chapters which were established around the same period of time. So then talks were being held with respect to India, which regions you want to take it up over there. Then we decided we'll go for South Asia as well as Middle East as part of our chapter, and we went by the name of South Asia, West Asia, chapter of ELSO. So this was the region initially, including India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and the entire Middle East also over here. As I said, in 2015 we were asked to take over the Africa region as well. Our objectives were to improve cognizance of ECMO in the South Asian, West Asian, African countries, make a common platform for those who were doing ECMO and planning to start the program, improve education and training programs, and to help with recruiting centers to become members of ELSO. Most importantly, to explore ways to reduce the cost of disposables of ECMO, if we can do that, and to promote the use of ELSO registry. So I was elected as the first chairman of ELSO, which I continued in that role till 2013. From my vision, I thought we should be able to help ELSO, especially in these areas, as these diseases are prevalent in these tropical countries than in the West, such as MERS at that time, plague, dengue, typhus, scrub typhus, TB, malaria, leptospirosis, legionella, snake bites, scorpion stings, etc. Poisons also was very important, and we made some impact in that. These are some of the countries which have been doing ECMO from South Asia, South Africa, and West Asia. One of the slides showing which are the active centers doing ECMO and which are the non-active centers not doing ECMO at the present time in our region, South Asia, West Asia, Africa, and Central North Asia. We are a total of 82 countries altogether. All the countries are not doing ECMO. We are promoting ECMO in the countries which can afford to do ECMO and supporting them with the training activities. So this is the SWAC chapter status in 2021. You can see the number of centers which have gone up to 45 now in 28 cities, and the number is growing. So the Asian centers which are not doing ECMO and the African countries which are not doing ECMO is shown in this slide. In the past five years, some of our centers have come up with establishing excellent centers with respect to the ECMO. One of them is Riddhivinayak Center, with which I am associated in Mumbai. They got Platinum Award of Excellence and it stands till 2024. These are awarded by Central ELSO. And Gold Award of Excellence for King Faisal Specialist Hospital, Riyadh, by the Ministry of Health, and Al Adhan Hospital in Kuwait also. And the Silver Award also you can see over there. In UAE, we have 3 regions mainly catering for the ECMO facilities to a varying degree. And Dr. Salman spoke about Abu Dhabi region. In Dubai at Mediclinic Parkview Hospital, Al Jalila and Dubai Hospital, ECMO is being provided, and at Sharjah, Al Qasimi Hospital is providing ECMO too. Most importantly, I have, as a chairman of ELSO, I face this, chairman of SWAC ELSO, I face the questions like, in view of the poverty, do we still need ECMO? This is one of the very important questions I had to face. But if you look at our population, SWAC ELSO region caters to 3.694 billion population, which is 46% of the world population, out of which South Asia nearly 2 billion, West Asia of 2,890 million, and Africa 1.4 billion. So I said you cannot leave 46% of the population without having access to ECMO, and we have to continue teaching and training people in doing this service. We are having varying economies, as we have been discussing earlier. In the West Asia, mostly it is government funded projects with higher socio-economic, public funded, and needs improving awareness and more of training facilities. Whereas in countries such as India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, it is mostly a mixed income group. Health insurance is one of the important aspects, but more than that, most of the ECMOs are self-funded. Families cater to the funding. Government institutions, if they take up, probably the cost will come down, and we are focusing on that. Cost of the healthcare is a concern and needs improving awareness and training opportunities too. So with respect to India, in government hospitals and private hospitals, ECMO is being done a lot more in private hospitals and minimally in government hospital setting. The challenges I stated earlier. The need for cardiac support wise, late referral for cardiac surgeries is seen in India and certain other countries as well. Complex cardiac surgeries need extended cardiopulmonary bypass time. They can be benefited by ECMO and myocarditis. I sadly lost one baby, one 6-year-old child last week over here too. Scorpion sting and snake bites are the other things which can be helped as well. So we have been hosting conferences. Now we are up to 9th conference of SWAC also so far. These are our milestones in celebrating our success, workshops, hands-on experience, programs. They are being held over here as well. We have made a significant improvement in the simulation programs as well with respect to ECMO training, learning from sister chapters and eminent speakers from all over the world, sharing our stories and supporting each other. This is the first conference which I held in Hyderabad in 2014 in Hyderabad, India. And at the time, some of our ECMO faculty from ELSO, they came over as well. Steve Conrad has been a strong pillar for us in establishing this program and this chapter too, and Peter Rikers you can see, and Chris is sitting there as well. So this was our picture from that time, the conference attendees for the first international chapter of SWAC also. This is Dr. Tejasvi. She was Miss Earth. She gave dancing performance on that occasion. Our second conference was at Narayan Hrudayalaya in Bangalore in India. Bob Bartlett came for that conference at that time, and it was a great success with more than 500 delegates. And this is the third conference in 2016 in Abu Dhabi. The next one was in Doha, Qatar. The fifth conference in Delhi again. Poonam Malhotra, she organized the conference then, and Bob came again to be with us. The next conference was in Egypt, and then in South Africa. This is one of the talks by Bob on physiology, ECMO physiology in Egypt at that time. He is an eloquent speaker on many topics, but most importantly on ECMO physiology. This was from South Africa, and the last one at Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So we conducted, and we have been conducting lots of training programs in our centers and collaborating them. This was one of the training programs which we did in Oman, in India, Oman again. So lots of international faculty have been with us and collaborating with them in learning from time to time and taking our training programs forward. These are some of the ELSO sponsored workshops in our countries, in India, in Kuwait, Dubai, UAE and other countries as well, Egypt. So we made some important landmark publications in the last 3 years. These are quoted here as well, and Bob has his blessings with all the chapters and more so with our chapter 2 over here. He will be coming for the next chapter as well, next chapter meeting as well in India. The cost of ECMO is so variable, as Chris was talking about humongous numbers, around 2 million pounds or so, but in some of our countries unfortunately we cannot afford, but still I want to make ECMO available to the middle income group in India. In future it should be possible. How it is going to be possible is by means of if you leave buying the machine as a capital expense, and if the cost of the disposables, blood products, labor, ICU charges, etc., if they come down, then we should be able to make it affordable. There are lots of colleagues here from India who have been sitting over there. You know how the situation is like. In private setup, the cost of ECMO is very much high, but if it happens in a government sponsored organization, all these facilities are free of cost. Blood products, labor, ICU charges and all the subspecialties, they are available over there, and it's just the cost of disposables which can be brought down as well. So that is one of my visions, to bring the cost down, and some of the hospitals including the autonomous institutes, they are following, they started doing ECMO on this basis. So we have a website for us. I encourage you to have a look at SWAC ELSO. We all come under South Asia, West Asia, Africa chapter of ELSO. I will show you another picture. We still feel that despite the fact ECMO being a high cost intervention, but still as there is life somewhere in the universe apart from us, like there are other countries also working under the same principles of self-funded ECMO. So it should be possible for us, if we put our thoughts together, we can make ECMO cost effective. So the future is we need to work together, keeping the cost low and make it a life-saving program. Pull the data together and share your experiences, publish and report to SWAC ELSO. So these are the upcoming conferences. I invite you all for the next conference in March 2023 at Ludhiana in India, and the next one after that in 2024 will be in Kuwait. Still we haven't announced where the 2025 conference is likely to be, but it could be in Abu Dhabi. So this is where we were at 2010, 2013 time at the starting point of SWAC ELSO. In this region you can see just one center was there at that time, and now this is how we are, how densely increasing the numbers of centers. These are ELSO registered centers. Apart from this, there are huge number of centers which haven't registered with ELSO and still doing ECMO. So this is just a minority or a fraction of those centers which have been doing ECMO in these countries. So by helping each other with the help of technology, identifying the need and the necessity and taking it forward with innovations, we should bring it forward. I have this dream, like 20 years ago cardiac surgery was very difficult for the middle income group, but nowadays it is available to a large section of the community. Similarly, maybe in another 10 years time ECMO should be available to many other people, it will be made affordable as well. So in summary, I dealt with these things, the genesis of SWAC ELSO and vision for SWAC ELSO, the challenges we have been facing, especially with respect to economies, how we can make it affordable, and the training aspects. Future depends on mutual cooperation, knowledge sharing, and indigenous manufacturing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suneel. Have we got any questions?
Dr. Suneel, I really enjoyed your talk because you touched on several of my favorite points. One, I worked in over 8 different types of hospitals, right? From government hospitals to charity to private to self-funded to different types of hospitals. And I've been on the forefront of cost cutting. And out of that, we have seen that self-funded is actually good because when a patient comes on a budget, we have to stick the ECMO program into the budget the patient has. He has 3,000 dirhams, we have to do it within 3,000 dirhams. How you do it is in the surgeon's hands or the team's hands. So that's one thing I wanted to say. I was happy you showed Madras Medical College. I'm an alumnus of Madras Medical College on the photograph, and you also mentioned Narayan Hrudaya, where myself and Drisya were trained. And we are happy to have Drisya because she's quite experienced in ECMO. And the cost of ECMO, you were asking, in India has come down significantly because of COVID. And every hospital started purchasing an ECMO machine, which costs around 25 lakh Indian rupees, which is about 110
More
dirhams.
than the cost of a ventilator.
Yes. Yeah. It's come down drastically because the numbers are there. And once every hospital has ECMO, there's a competition between hospitals to reduce the cost. So the circuit manufacturers, the oxygenator manufacturers have to sell at a lower cost. So it's all about negotiating and pricing, and I'll be very happy to work with you to see how we can bring these Indian principles of cost cutting into the ELSO program. And I can introduce you to some very good doctors who are running successful programs, and we can share the Indian experience of cost cutting into the West, which because of the insurance funded system, people don't look at the bill. And we do not know how to reduce the cost. But in India, we are forced to reduce cost, and I can help you get that technology of finance management into this.
Thank you very much. Like many of the international colleagues have been helping us with this. As I said, we represent 46% of the world population, and it has to be available to the to the needy population despite our affordability. UAE government is doing the best thing, but many people in the world are not so fortunate. But it is my vision and our collective vision as well to make sure the cost cutting is done and it will be made available one day. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. Just a quick question and a message. I'm representing one of those companies providing the ECMO therapy and technology. So my question to the ELSO organization is that we are facing some issues in terms of communication, and especially regarding the language. In some, some societies, French, maybe English, maybe Arabic, on doctor's level, this is something that could be solved. But on the personal level, we found that in some hospitals, some societies, the nurses or technicians, we found some issues regarding the language. Does ELSO SWAC has something in this specific point? Thank you.
Are you meaning to for training? Yes, focusing on training.
See, we have people speaking different languages in our part of the chapter of ELSO. At one time, it was suggested to us regarding the ELSO Red Book, I'm talking about it. Do you want it in different languages such as in Arabic, French, etc.? But when we went for the polling, many people have agreed that let it be in English for this point of time, and that's why it was left in English. Here, Ibrahim from Doha, he was leading on this education task before. So the Arabic version is being dealt with the programs wise, but mostly so far English has been remaining as the main instruction. We are welcome to take it forward, but currently as per the requirement of physicians, it was left with English as that. Huda has taken over as the education chair. Elections happen every 2 years. So currently Huda from Kuwait, she is the education chair.
Tricia, you have a question? Hang on, I'll give you the microphone. This is Dricia, our ECMO coordinator, previously mentioned, very experienced.
Currently, Dr. Huda, as of now, I was the one who translated the English language to Malayalam. So right now, Dr. Huda is working on translating, at least for the patient's sake, all the languages into, right now, I know Malayalam, Tamil, Urdu, Hindi has been worked out, and Arabic has been worked out. At least we are translating it for the patients and their families to understand the concept of ECMO, not as such a training part, but at least patients and the common layman to understand what ECMO is. It is being working in the behind the back, I know that.
Yeah. Thank you. In our training programs as well, people from different countries, they come and attend. Recently in June, when we conducted our ELSO's recognized annual training program, people from Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Bangladesh, they were with us along with colleagues from India as well. So almost all the times people from different countries, they attend the program.
Okay, thank you very much, Suneel. And okay, I'm happy to introduce Dr. Crawford Fulton, who's one of our team here in SKMC. He's also been in Alderhay prior to joining us here, and he was a fellow in Melbourne at the Royal Children's Hospital. Well, so Dr. Crawford's going to be talking to us about echocardiography. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, hi. Thanks for having me, Mark. Thanks, good to be here. I'm just going to talk on the use of echocardiography in ECMO. So what we'll do, just a quick roundup. What we'll do is I'll talk about when we should think about using echo, how to use it, how I've been incorporating it in my practice. I'll give you a few examples when it's been really useful to help patients, really. Some great examples. Some quick disclosures. I've only been in the UAE for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks now. I've discovered that no one understands me here. So if you can't understand me, please ask me to be clearer, stop mumbling, shut up, whatever you want. I'm not a paediatric cardiologist. I'm not an expert by any means, but I've got a real interest in cardiac and scanning on kids on ECMO. And finally, there's quite a few videos in here. If I forget to explain them properly, you don't understand, you don't see what you're saying, then just ask me and we'll go through them. Okay. So echo and ECMO, fairly standard practice now. The adults have been doing it for a very long time, and paediatrics as well. There's now lots of literature out there to support its use. And to talk about how to use it in different patients. And this paper in particular from Frontiers has been very useful, giving us quite a good guidelines and kind of protocol to follow and what we should be looking for on children in ECMO. It's not always possible. It's nice when we can do it, but it's not always possible, especially in kids when they come back from theatre with open chests. There's lots of air in the chest. Lots of dressing. Sometimes you can't get a probe anywhere near the patient, so it's not possible, and it's not always essential by any means, but when we can do it, it's good. So when should we do it? There's opportunities throughout the ECMO journey for patients when we should be thinking about it, and it can complement our practice. Before we come on to ECMO, pre-ECMO, during the cannulation itself, during the run, and then to think about when we're going to wean, and in the weaning process we can be used, and I'll give you some examples throughout that. So pre-ECMO, what we're looking for pre-ECMO, again, it's not always possible. You know, kids, sometimes the situations are too urgent and children are becoming too unwell too quickly. We don't have the opportunity to get the ECMO. But if we can get a full structural and functional assessment of the heart before they go into ECMO, it's very, very helpful. Things like, such as this at the top, this is a pericardial effusion. Sometimes children decompensate. There's things that can be fixed, trying to optimise so they don't actually need, we can negate the use for ECMO. And other things to think about, are any problems with the valves, such as AR, if there's any aortic regurgitation, that can really make ECMO difficult. It might change your approach. It might change how we manage this patient. And other things such as PDAs, BT shunts, any kind of shunt that might actually change how you manage your ECMO, how you manage the patient on ECMO itself. So there's lots of things to look for, ideally, if you've got the chance pre-ECMO. And the other thing, particularly in more respiratory patients, if you can get a good functional assessment of the heart, particularly if there's a bit of a struggle, if they're on a bit of inotrope, they're on a lot of ventilation, is this someone that will just benefit from VV? Or in fact, we need to go for VA, and ECHO has been particularly useful in that patient group as well. So it's good to help planning ECMO strategy, help the cannulation at times. It can also anticipate any problems. It can help you identify problems that may develop on ECMO. So cannulation, I'm sure you've talked a lot about it over the last couple of days. Adults use it for pretty much standard as they're cannulating, both percutaneous and central. And then this is an ultrasound at the top here, just a sizing up the vein. So back in the UK, I was actually emailing Chris. Nice to meet you. How you doing? Yeah. And he was giving me a lot of advice on how to size up vessels. It's been really useful. We used it quite recently in SKMC just to get the right cannula size, not to overdo it, not to underdo it, to get the best ECMO possible. And then this is a picture here. This is an IVC coming into the right atrium of a child we put on ECMO back home. This is the wire coming up. So we can see as the wire comes up from the femoral vein, then you can identify the wire within the vein, the IVC itself. You know it's safe, you're in the right position, you can start dilating up. So it's quite useful for a safety perspective as well. And also it's used the standard for the double lumen. I'm sure you also touched upon this to make sure the double lumen is in the correct position, but I won't talk about that just now. So this is a neonates in particular, so neonatal VA ECMO I did a lot of in our previous hospital. So as you can imagine, you're coming in the neck, you're coming into the heart, small spaces, and there's a lot of room for error if these cannulas aren't in perfect positions. And we've seen quite a lot of problems with cannulas in not the perfect position, which has caused problems for the patient itself. So here's an echo used here. This is the SVC coming down. This is the IVC here. This is the right atrium. This is the tricuspid valve just coming in. You can see this cannula's coming in here. We'll talk about that positioning in a bit of time. You can also see how the right atrium here, for a baby, the right atrium is only about 2 centimetres if even. So there's not much space, not much room for error really. So echo in this patient population I've found has been really helpful at the time of cannulation. So during the run, why would you want to do an echo during the run? There's a number of different reasons why you want to do an echo. I suppose it also depends a lot on the patient itself. Is it a cardiac patient, respiratory patient? So there's huge variation. But this is some guidance on what we should be looking for here. Functional assessment, is the heart getting better? Well, usually you can see that on the arterial trace anyway, but it's good to see, you can do serial measurements to see things getting better with time. And then other problems. And this isn't a massively uncommon problem, where we've got a patient with a good pulsatile nature on the arterial line, and suddenly we lose pulsation. It might be on cannulation, it might get better, or it might be out the blue. If we lose pulsation, that should prompt us to think, what's going on here? Is there a problem? Is there a change in the physiology? Something's happening. And this is something that can happen here. So this is a parasternal long axis of a left ventricle. So this here is the left atrium, mitral valve, left ventricle, and that's the aortic valve here. So can everyone see what this is? Anyone know what this is called? Yeah, spontaneous contrast. You can see the mitral valve is opening occasionally, and then the aortic valve is not opening. This is here, and this kind of swirling ghost-like appearance here is called spontaneous contrast. And why is that bad? Well, it's bad for a number of reasons. I'm sure you've talked about it previously, but ultimately this is a precursor for clot. If you've got a clot in your left ventricle, you're going to end up in trouble. Other problems is it causes a lot of tension on the wall. So the heart, reducing the chances of this heart getting better if that's the problem. And also the back pressure from the ventricle to the atrium to the lungs will cause severe lung disease as well. So this is something that needs to be identified and managed aggressively when patients are on ECMO. This is what happens if it's not dealt with. So this is a slightly different view. This is the right side here, right ventricle, right atrium, and this is the left ventricle. And you can see now this left ventricle isn't moving at all, and it's filled with clot, which is going to need significant attention. Other reasons to think about ECMO during the run is pericardial effusions aren't uncommon as well. So if you're losing flows, there's problems with the ECMO itself, then it's also worth ruling out pericardial effusions, which can be managed. Weaning, when should we be scanning when we're weaning? Well, again, it depends on the patient. Cardiac patients post-cardiac surgery can, you can often see on the monitor, you can see them getting better with time. You don't necessarily need echoes to make sure you're happy to come off ECMO. But this patient population here, which we've talked about already, is the diaphragms, babies with high pulmonary pressures, whether it be meconium aspiration, diaphragmatic hernia, etc., can be quite tricky to work out when's the right time to take off ECMO. Things look okay, but ultimately you want to know the pulmonary pressures. Are the right-sided pressures getting better with time? And echo is particularly good for this patient population. This is a patient that went on with high pulmonary pressures, a neonate. You can see here, this is the right heart, very swollen. This is the left heart, looks very empty, it looks very small. This is a structurally normal heart. So this is a patient who would be a bit cautious about taking off ECMO if they went on for high pulmonary pressures. You want to get a bit more time potentially, or manage the pulmonary pressures a different way. And this is another similar patient who went on to ECMO with high pulmonary pressures. This was the echo before we went on to ECMO. This is the parasternal short axis. So this is a large right atrium, right ventricle. And this is a small left ventricle. And you can see the septum's bowing into the left side. So the pressures on the right side are very high. Went on to ECMO, had a run of ECMO after 12 days. And then this is as we were clamping. So in the weaning process, we did an echo. And you can see now this left ventricle is much more rounded and the septum isn't pushing into the left ventricle as it was before. So it gives you a bit more confidence. If you're coming to that point of cannulation or decannulation, weaning, echo can be just another clinical sign to add to your armoury to say, yeah, I'm comfortable to think about taking this patient off ECMO. So I'll just talk about some cases now that have been useful. So this is a patient, a neonate with meconium aspiration, PPHN, who was cannulated for ECMO. This is the X-ray here. And then as soon as they get cannulated, we're getting problems with flows. And you can see the nurses are saying, oh, the circuit's chattering, we can't get flows going, there's problems here. And you get this kind of chattering of the circuit. Any ideas what's going on? So that cannula looks quite long in the X-ray. This is the venous cannula here, coming down here. It's arterial cannula just here, up there. So suspicion there might be a problem with the cannula. So we're getting ECMO to see exactly where the cannula is positioned. Now this is the picture we saw before. So this is the SVC here. This is the bicaval view. This is the IVC. I've put this picture here just so you can orientate yourself. This is normal bicaval view here. So you can see this cannula here. It's coming in from the top of the SVC, and it's actually dragging the wall of the right atrium towards the liver there, and it's indenting the liver. So these cannulas have got holes at the end. They've got holes at the side. So it'll still have some drainage, but that's going to cause problems potentially for your ECMO flow. The nurses, in response to this, to keep the circuit going, fluid is given. But ultimately what needs to happen is this cannula needs to be positioned, brought back a bit, and then you don't have to worry about fluid overload and keep filling up the patient. So this cannula was retracted, and then this is this was after. So you can see now the cannula's in the mid-right atrium, and as soon as that, no problems with the flow, everything went well. This is another patient. This is a wee girl who came from a neonatal unit. She was an X25 weeker. She was 4 months of age, and she had RSV bronchiolitis after a recent outbreak of RSV in a neonatal unit. She was cannulated for ECMO via the neck. We didn't really have the option for VV where we were working before, and we struggled a bit with flows initially. And this is her echo. This is her X-ray here. So as standard, we thought we'd get an echo to see the cannula position because the flows weren't great. You can see this is a similar view, not quite as nice picture, but this is the cannula coming from the IVC. This is the IVC. This is the cannula coming from the SVC. It's kind of straddling over the IVC and the hepatic vein itself. So So we thought, yeah, maybe think about pulling that back will improve flows. We thought maybe have a look at the arterial cannula as well. And this was the echo of the arterial cannula. So this here is just, again, to orientate ourselves here. This is the arch. First, second, third branch coming off. So you can see here. It's the echo picture. It's a wee schematic. So this is the arterial cannula here, coming down. And the tip is about here. See the flow there? So on echo, blue flow is away from the probe. Red flow is towards the probe. So we felt, yeah, that cannula looks fairly far in. But it should be okay. We probably don't have to do anything about that. And then the nurses tell us some information. So the NIRS was very poor on the head, the near-infrared spectroscopy. The saturations in the hand were poor in the 80s, and the feet were very good. So we're saturating the toes, no problem, but the brain and the hands didn't seem to be working so well. So has anyone got any idea what might be happening there? Sorry? Yeah, exactly. So this is the... because the cannula flow was coming through the tip of the cannula here, this baby was on VA ECMO for respiratory disease, so the heart was working fine, and the lungs were not working, so the heart, anything that's coming out of the heart was deoxygenated. So we were supplying the head and neck around here with deoxygenated blood, and this cannula was supplying the body here. So not ideal. You don't want to give a patient a run of ECMO if you're not going to oxygenate the brain. So we manipulated the cannulas. The cannulas came back, and not only did the flows improve, but oxygenation improved thereafter as well. So quite similar to, I think you've heard about Harlequin or north-south divide in adults as well. I think this is a kind of similar physiology where you get the deoxygenated blood from the native cardiac output meeting the oxygenated blood of the ECMO circuit here. This is an angiogram just to kind of understand the schematic. So this was injection of... the contrast was injected through the arterial cannula, and you can see as it rises up through the arch fluoroscopy, you can see the aortic valve just about opening there. And this is a similar idea. So similar physiology from adults, which is applied here in children and babies. This is another baby. You'll see a pattern. Here's lots of high pulmonary pressure babies on VA ECMO. This is a baby, one-day-old meconium aspiration, who cannulates from the neck. No problems with the cardiovascular system. A small amount of inotrope, good ejection, mainly for lungs. As soon as they're cannulated from the neck, they lose ejection altogether. So you can see this is the arterial line. We've lost ejection again. So we do an echo, of course, and this is what we find. So this is a view here. We've got both cannulas in one view. This is the SVC coming into the right atrium. And this is the arterial cannula in the aorta here. So we've got both of the aorta coming up here, and we've got the IVC here. Anyone got any idea what's happening there? Yeah, exactly. So this, instead of the cannula coming down the descending aorta, is actually going towards the aortic cannula. And again, this needs to be managed, yeah. So, say again, Mark? Yeah, no problem. So, I think I've got another picture. Yeah. So, what you can see here, this is the cannula, the aortic cannula here. That's the tip of the cannula. And it's shooting blood. This is the aortic valve here. So, the blood is going directly towards the aortic valve. This is a wee schematic again, just to show. So, instead of the previous patient, we saw it down here, but now it's gone down here. Does that make sense? Yeah. So why is that problematic? Well, if your heart can't open up, the aortic valve can't open, you're going to end up in trouble. So this is something that had to be managed again. So we pulled the cannula back, and the heart, you start getting ejection on the trace, the heart starts emptying, no problems. But these are big problems, or potentially big problems. They're not, often people go into ECMO and think, oh, we're okay, we're fine on ECMO, no problems. But if you don't manage these problems actively, then the patients will never get better. So based on these cases in particular, we really pushed hard for echo, and echo is a great way to actually direct vision as people are cannulating to see exactly where the cannulas go. Okay, it's come towards the end now. This is a one-year-old boy who had RSV bronchiolitis, or presented with RSV bronchiolitis, and it became quite clear that he had myocarditis, enteroviral positive myocarditis. This is his X-ray pre and post cannulation. This is his echo shortly after cannulation. So we see his heart function is very, very poor. This is an apical 4 chamber, left ventricle, right ventricle, right atrium, and the left atrium here. So you can see the function is very, very poor. The left ventricle is not functioning well at all, and the left atrium is very large, distended, and these lungs were getting worse and worse with time. His lungs wouldn't get better at all. So we're a bit concerned about this. As the left ventricle distends, pulls the mitral valve apart, and you start getting mitral regurgitation, which is this turquoise jet here, which worsens the problem further. You end up getting higher LA pressures and wetter lungs. We felt we had to do something to try and combat this. So because we've gone through the neck instead of an open chest, if you've got an open chest, usually quite easy, I'm not a surgeon, but usually quite easy to put a vent in the left side and just directly drain the left side of the heart. But he didn't have an open chest, a closed chest, so it makes it quite tricky. In adults, they've got a few more options available to them, but for children, our options are slightly more limited. So this was, we found a small PFO, sorry. So this here, where's my pointer? Yeah. This here is a very small PFO, which we felt we could balloon open. So our cardiology colleagues kindly ballooned the hole, and this is what we got thereafter. Oh, give the answer away. So this is post-ballooning. You can see the hole now is slightly bigger. We gave that some time to see if that would work. However, unfortunately, the lungs remained wet. It still didn't feel like it was decompressing the left side, and it was still quite a restrictive hole through the atrial septum. So ultimately, the cardiac colleagues opted to do this. Does anyone know what this is? So they've put a stent in the atrial septum. So you can see the stent's come right across the atrial septum here, and it's completely decompressed the right side. It's now not restrictive anymore, and you can see the left atrium had dramatically improved with time, and the lungs got better. He had some more time, and eventually this boy got off ECMO with his myocarditis, and his cardiac function returned to normal. This is his echo from clinic. Oh, so many buttons. This was his echo from clinic 6 months ago. You can see the stent has migrated from the atrial septum into the right side of the heart. But you can see his function's working very well now. He had a great recovery despite having the stent in there, which the cardiologists continue to watch. So, in summary, hopefully I've shown you some ways that ECHO has been useful, some interesting pictures, some videos. You see how it can be used to help patients on ECMO. It's a great tool, and it's good to work with our cardiology colleagues to get the best out for these patients. Okay, that's me. Thanks very much.
Any questions for Dr. Crawford? Some wonderful pictures. A nice celebration going on at the end there, by the look of it. Tell us about the beers on the screensaver.
When I finished my job in Melbourne, we went to holiday in New Zealand. It was a very good brewery. So we were celebrating.
Echo-related questions?
Thanks so much. How frequent you have observed reactive pericardial effusion in percutaneous cannulation on VV ECMO? Not related to perforation or major complication, more of reactive.
I'm probably not the right person to answer that question. My experience was mainly VA ECMO, where I'd worked previously. So I haven't got great experience of pericardial effusion with VV? That maybe Chris will tell us.
Not common at all. Once in a blue moon, I think we've seen about 3 or 4 out of hundreds, if not, well, touching 1,000 now.
You know, for weaning, do you kind of use any objective parameters, you know, like ejection fraction, or do you use any tissue Doppler indices or anything of that sort to kind of give you an idea on the suitability for weaning off ECMO?
In which patient group?
I mean, post-cardiotomy patients or patients on respiratory ECMO, but VA respiratory ECMO?
No, we haven't really formalised it up. There's guidance in the papers, obviously, with tissue Doppler and different markers of function. We haven't really formalised any process. It's a bit of an eyeball, get a feel for it.
I think it's fair to say that in the published literature, the adult indices are much better established. They've got data behind them, the ejection fractions and the TAPSEs and everything, and that's not there for our pediatric group yet.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We're going to move on now to our next speaker. Dr. Naga is going to be speaking to us about congenital diaphragmatic hernia, and Naga needs no introduction to any of our newcomers because he's our division chief, and you all know him from yesterday. Thank you, Dr. Naga.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much, Mark. Good morning, everyone. And once again, I want to congratulate Mark and the team. It's been a great workshop so far. And we are really lucky to have a number of cardiac surgeons today, and especially Chris, who not only puts these kids on ECMO, but also repairs their diaphragms, so we can draw on his expertise today, which is really a privilege. So ECMO in CDH is a much debated and a challenging aspect or topic. So let's see over the next, I have permission from Mark to go a bit over 30 minutes. So over the next 35, 40 minutes or so, I can give you a summary of what ECMO or how do we do it in CDH. My interest in CDH stems from the fact that I led an audit project in UK looking at the regional practice and develop a network guideline for management of CDH. And that's when I bumped into this lovely gentleman from Glasgow called Dr. Neil Patel, who's a neonatologist and also a trained in cardiology. And he is one of the leads in the CDH study group. And I have learned a great deal about CDH from his papers and interactions with him and some of his presentations. So over the next 30, 40 minutes, we'll talk about the pathophysiology of CDH and focus on the cardiac dysfunction, look at the role of ECMO, timing of the surgery and the controversies around it, look at a couple of cases, and try and chalk out a CDH pathway which can, maybe you can take away that home. So this is one of the patients I looked after in UK, and a neonate born like 15, 20 minutes drive from Alderhay in Liverpool in the Women's Hospital, had a left-sided diaphragmatic hernia with good antenatal indices, as in good observed to expected lung-head ratio, was stable in the first 48 hours, but had an air leak, as you can see, and then the FiO2 went up to 1 and nitric, and then patient really started going downhill and needed buckets of inotropes, and that's when we got an SOS call saying, can we have ECMO for this baby? And was transferred across to our PICU. And there are a number of mortality predicting models in CDH. One I find it very useful is this from Children's Orange County, Children's Health Orange County. So you can just Google that thing and put the variables, the antenatal and the postnatal variables, and it comes up with the probability of death. So just for the sake of this talk, I put the variables of this, my baby X, and the mortality predicted is about 62%. So hold on to this baby X, and we'll revisit this story a bit later. So the pathophysiology of CDH is concerned, we know that the lungs are hypoplastic and there is abnormal pulmonary vasculature. But what Siebert et al. Described in the 80s was there is abnormal or fetal cardiac maldevelopment as well. And there is smaller left atrial muscle mass, left ventricle, and the interventricular septum in the post-mortem examination of these infants. And then Masola et al. Looked at the mitral valve diameters and also the left ventricular area, and as early as 24 to 26 weeks, the mitral valve diameters and the LV area are very small. And they retrospectively looked at these measurements, and the mitral valve diameters and the Z-scores were much smaller in patients who died or who received ECMO for CDH. So fetal LV hypoplasia, reduced mitral valve diameters, and the left ventricular size is associated with adverse postnatal outcomes. So why is the LV hypoplastic in these babies? You all know that the fetal circulation is designed to divert the blood away from the lungs and give the best oxygenated blood to the brain. But it's altered in CDH. So what happens is the pulmonary blood flow is already low because of the high pulmonary vascular resistance, and there is altered ductus venosus streaming away from the left atrium, away from the foramen ovale, rather than going into the left atrium, goes back into the right ventricle, so reducing the LV preload. And there is direct mechanical compression of the herniated guts, and even sometimes liver and spleen as well. So let's see if we can chalk out an algorithm for you guys to take home. And so we've said that the lungs are crap, the abnormal vasculature, and that gives rise to high pulmonary vascular resistance. So obviously there is right to left shunting, and there is RV dysfunction. As you can see here, the RV is dilated and squashing the left ventricle. So this Crawford has nicely explained in the video and made my job easier. So once the RV starts getting round rather than crescent, it starts squashing the LV, and it further reduces the cardiac output. And it's some sort of, obviously LV is affected by the ventricular interdependence. So we have fetal LV hypoplasia, and the baby is now born, and we clamp the cord, you increase the afterload. So the already hypoplastic LV struggles with the increased afterload, and that's when these patients do get into trouble. And that, and then you add your RV dysfunction to this, then you have basically a struggling hypoplastic LV with poor function, and it in turn leads to pulmonary venous hypertension. Because of the pulmonary venous hypertension, some of these patients...
Naga, can you either go closer or use the roaming mic?
Okay. Yeah. So, sorry about that. So because of this pulmonary venous hypertension, some of these patients do not respond to inhaled nitric oxide because there is back pressure, high LA pressure, and it's pulmonary venous hypertension. So let's put those features of LV hypoplasia to our algorithm, and that's the video showing the LV dysfunction. So now we are in a vicious cycle of pulmonary hypertension, RV dysfunction, LV dysfunction, worsening cardiac output, which leads to hypoxia, acidosis, and systemic hypotension. So, and that self-perpetuates and makes the patient even more worse. And this is when most of us start thinking about ECMO. Probably we need to be anticipating it way ahead, way before. So Neil Patel describes that there are, CDH is obviously a spectrum, and there are a number of phenotypes. We may have a CDH with a normal cardiac function, or a pre-capillary type where you have RV dysfunction, or a post-capillary type, as I talked about, with LV dysfunction and pulmonary venous hypertension, or you can have biventricular dysfunction. So this is the multi-centered, prospectively collected data review by the CDH study group. As you can see here, ventricular dysfunction, they've shown that the ventricular dysfunction is a critical determinant of mortality in CDH. So that's if you only have RV dysfunction, the survival is just 65%, and if you have LV dysfunction, falls down to 55%, and if you have biventricular dysfunction, it's below 50%. And all cardiac dysfunction categories were associated with use of ECMO. So we do need a customized approach on pathophysiology, as one size does not fit all. So CDH, as you can see, is the most common indication for respiratory ECMO in neonates. And however, the mortality or the survival is about 50% compared to the meconium aspiration, where the survival is about 94%. And the runs in the CDH are longer, and average run reported to be 3 weeks. So why do we need ECMO, and how does ECMO work in CDH? So we need ECMO in CDH to allow the heart and the lungs to recover from the pulmonary hypertension, acute respiratory failure, cardiac dysfunction, and it also avoids ventilator-induced lung injury to the already hyperplastic lungs. However, there are two groups of patients, a group which there is potentially reversible pathology, and a fatal group, despite ECMO, they're going to die. So I wish we had a crystal ball to identify which, chalk from cheese. So that's where we need collaborative working with fetal medicine, neonatologists, cardiologists, in general surgeons, cardiac surgeons, and the intensivists. So we need to look at the antenatal predictors and start counseling the family from the birth, antenatally, and as well as at the birth of the baby, and start, discussing about risk stratification, managing family expectations, establishing care limits, and planning intensive and expensive treatment modalities like ECMO. So there are a number of antenatal predictors of mortality. This is observed to expected lung head ratio, total fetal lung volume now on MRIs, and looking at the pulmonary artery, markers of pulmonary artery hyperplasia, and the liver herniation stuff. And this is quite interesting. This paper, looks at the fetal lung volume, and the magic number is if your lung volume is less than 25 mils, then the rate of ECMO goes up, and as the volume drops, the mortality goes up. But we don't, it's not going to be helpful. We get a phone call saying patient has a pH of 7, we need ECMO, but not have this information or have that information at that time. We need this information way before the ECMO referral. And then you have postnatal markers, as looking at the ventilatory stuff, gas exchange, and if the patient had a cardiac index, a cardiac arrest or oxygenation index, and if there are any other comorbidities. Oops. So we can either do VA ECMO or VV ECMO. So this is the ELSO criteria, which basically says for the CDH, which are eligible for ECMO or consideration for ECMO, with when it's hypoxia, hypercapnia, or the ventilator pressures are very high, and the oxygenation index is as high as 40 for 3 hours or so. And if you have circulatory failure and pulmonary hypertensive crisis or acute deterioration. That's how you calculate the oxygenation index. And however, if you wait until that criteria, you might not be able to move this patient from a peripheral hospital to the ECMO center. So the earlier discussions are better. And just like we discussed about these contraindications for most of the VA ECMO, that's similar to for the CDH as well. And the weight under 2.5 kilo gets a bit challenging, and the CDH, the patients already have much smaller vein vessels than a normal neonate. So the CDH was, ECMO in CDH was first used by the Boston group in the 80s. And at the same time, the Toronto was managing these patients with conventional strategies with high frequency as the rescue strategy. Although the ECMO was being used, the survival was no different. But but that's because they were still using aggressive hyperventilation and respiratory alkalosis, so bashing these lungs so much, so the ECMO didn't make any difference. And then in the 90s, the permissive hypercapnia and gentle ventilation was taken up, and that's what made big difference to survival of these patients. And then the ECMO and repair on the ECMO with using fibrinolytic agents started making improvement to the survival rate. So this is a paper, the recent meta-analysis, retrospective review of nearly 2,500 neonates on the ELSO registry. And the survival reported here is about 50%, and the decline of 14% in the last 25 years. But what to take from this paper is that more and more patients on the severe spectrum are being put on ECMO, and that's probably why the survival is coming down. And this paper concludes saying that the risks outweigh the rewards in this patient population. So that's the meta-analysis. But if you look at the single center studies and the high volume centers which do a lot of ECMO in CDH patients, they report a survival of 70 to 85%, much higher than a cardiac ECMO patient or for a post-cardiotomy. Then the highest survival rates are also reported in places where the patients are managed even without ECMO, but where they are the ECMO centers, because the expertise is there, the multidisciplinary team environment is there. And then in the Euro consortium, in Europe, they introduced standardized protocolized management of CDH patients. Once that was done in 2008, the survival went up from 67% to 88%. So VA ECMO is more commonly used because of the size of the patients, and now because people have recognized that cardiac dysfunction plays a major role. And whenever 18% of these patients had VV ECMO, whoever had VV ECMO, 18% of the veno-venous ECMO was converted to VA ECMO, and then the survivor drops in those group of patients where they were converted. So now, looking at timing of the repair, and this is another debate of whether to operate on ECMO, off ECMO, before ECMO, or after the decannulation. So looking at the data, there are 10% of them get repaired before the ECMO, 47% on ECMO, which is the much larger proportion, 28% after ECMO, and 15% don't survive. So this is a paper in 2021 by Glenn et al. Looking at 248 patients who had early repair, as in within 72 hours of ECMO cannulation, and 922 of their patients were repaired off ECMO, and the survival was higher in early repair group nearly 90% compared to 78% in the repair after ECMO. And this is a study which compared early repair within 72 hours of cannulation versus late, which is 72 hours after cannulation, or repair post-decannulation, and similar survival rates in all groups. But the ECMO runs were much shorter in the early repair cohort. And this is another paper by Dassinger et al., who again showed survival up to 70% in the early repair within the 72 hours. And the bleeding, which is the most, people worry about bleeding on repair on ECMO, it's only been 9%. And now the same group from Texas who looked at early repair compared their data for the super early repair, which is within 24 hours of ECMO cannulation, and then compared to the early repair, which is within 72 hours. And if you operate within 24 hours, the survival is much higher. But the mean ventilation and length of stay are all same. And this is a group, Partridge et al., the results are slightly different, smaller group, and the 17 patients who were operated after decannulation had 100% survival compared to the 3 repaired before or 40 repaired on ECMO. So when the surgeons obviously embark on repairing on ECMO, obviously we need to optimize the anticoagulation, lower your anticoagulation threshold, increase your platelet numbers and the fibrinogen levels, and there is a role for fibrinolytic agents as a bolus preoperatively, and which is continues as infusion throughout the operation, as well as short period perioperatively, postoperatively. And then you can be guided by TEG or ROTEM to transfuse blood products. And the surgeons have their tricks with the sealants and temporary abdominal closure, silos, etc. And this is a Mannheim experience, which is a slightly different approach. What they do is they have a very low threshold for putting patients on ECMO. And their average duration for ECMO run is about 10 days. And then they usually prefer to decannulate, and then 2 days after decannulation, they operate. However, if they fail to decannulate, they extend the ECMO run until 21 days, and if the patient fails to wean, they don't offer any approach. So pragmatic, but different to the North American centers or the European centers. So coming back to my baby X, who was struggling with air leak and buckets of inotropes, and mortality probability factor, which was about 62%, probably won't survive without ECMO. So we had another pneumothorax on the left side. We put in a drain on that side, as well as cannulated. As you can see, the aortic cannula is a bit down, way more enthusiastic, but it was an emergency procedure, and later it was repositioned. And then our plan was, the main issue has been the air leak, so let's give the baby about 5 days, let's get the air leak sorted, and then repair was what we were thinking. That was the MDT decision. But this is on day 4, the lungs were getting wiped out, and we could see that there's a big mediastinal shift, and the cannulas were being pushed to the other side. And at this point, we decided to do a CT scan, and what we noticed was the contents of the hernia and the spleen was squashing the LV completely, and the cannula were pushed out. So we went ahead and repaired on ECMO on day 5 with a patch and a silo. The gut was in the silo. The new drain, baby came back with new drains. And then we tried to wean on day 11. Failed because of the suprasystemic pulmonary pressures. And then we went back on ECMO, gave more epoprostenol, sildenafil, and tried again, and we managed to get the baby off on day 15. And then the abdomen was closed later, with a patch, and the skin was closed, and then the baby got extubated 2 weeks post-decannulation, and the length of the stay on ICU was 5 weeks. And the same calculator, you can also put some ECMO variables, and it comes up with a probability of death. And while the baby was on ECMO, the probability of death was 85%. But alhamdulillah, this baby X survived discharge and is under pulmonology follow-up. So this is another baby, one of the Neil Patel's patient. Day 1, left-sided CDH, hypotensive, with a lot of inotropes. So ECMO was instigated within 24 hours. And however, the function started improving. Why is this not playing? And on day 4, they actually decannulated the baby, and the repair was done post-decannulation. So if there is early recovery on ECMO, and then you can wait and try and wean off and then do the repair. Then another patient we had was a right-sided CDH with liver up. If the liver is up, their prognosis is a bit poor, and that's the X-ray. And we went on ECMO and operated on ECMO and that was the RV dysfunction with suprasystemic pressures, won't be managed by conventional management. So we went on ECMO and operated on day 5. And I was receiving this baby who just came back from OR, and suddenly we started losing the ECMO flows. And that was my dodgy POCUS. Even I could make out that something was wrong and something was quashing the heart. So we called obviously triggered the crash call, and the surgeons came in, and by the time the X-ray was there, and as you can see, there's a big hemothorax pushing the cannulas to the other side, and went back to OR and had a drain and a hemostasis and came back. And repair was done on day 5, drama on the same day, but decannulated on day 7. So duration of ECMO-wise, so the data shows that if you are on ECMO for 2 weeks, the survival is 56%, 3 weeks, 46, 4 weeks, 43, 5 weeks, 15%, 40 days, don't bother. So weaning, it's similar to any other ECMO, but as Crawford alluded to, we rely on echoes to look at the function and the TR, the RV pressures, and the shunting, and try and trial off. So we need to be looking at multimodal assessment and multidisciplinary team assessment. If you have right from the antenatal stage, you need to be looking at the antenatal imaging and chest X-rays and the postnatal ventilatory settings to give an idea of pulmonary hyperplasia. You assess the pulmonary hypertension factors, looking at the oxygenation index, pre and post ductal saturations, and keep watching or monitor regularly, assess the echo cardiac function. So just to summarize the pathway, so you need to do a gentle lung protective ventilation with permissive hypercapnia strategy. It might be conventional or high frequency. Keep assessing the cardiac function, and MDT decisions about the timing of repair, ECMO, or extubation. And if the baby is getting into trouble, look at the pulmonary vascular and cardiac support. If there is RV dysfunction or hypoxia, consider inhaled nitric oxide. Some of them do respond. RV dysfunction, they do respond. And then the milrinone, sildenafil, and ipoprostenol are other weapons in your armory. And sometimes, if your RV is really dilated, you can start prostaglandin to open up the duct and offload the RV, and that buys you some time. But you need to be careful as the RV recovers and the shunt becomes left to right, maybe thinking about stopping then. And if you have LV dysfunction, you use milrinone, low-dose epinephrine, and try not to bash that small LV with a lot of dopamine, dobutamine, chronotropics, and do not use excessive vasoconstriction. And if you're worried and thinking about ECMO, do ECMO and consider repair early. But all this, the key factor to this is patient selection and regular MDT discussions. So can we take cues from the pathophysiology of the patient to see which patient we can repair on ECMO or which patient we can wait? So if you have pulmonary hyperplasia and hypercarbia, and first think about, is this in the fatal group or a potentially reversible group based on the assessment or antenatal indices, and then go for early repair on ECMO. And then if you have pulmonary hypertension, hypoxia, RV failure, see how it goes for the first couple of days, but it's no improvement, repair on ECMO. And if you have severe LV dysfunction, if it is showing signs of improvement in the first few days, wait, it could be transient, and then repair. But not every patient reads the book, so this is all just, very nice to talk about on the presentation, but clinical judgment and MDT discussions are the key. So why do people want to repair early? Because as you all know, in the ECMO, once you put patient on ECMO, there is inflammation, ECMO-induced coagulopathy, and the baby, as soon as you cannulate, the baby is still, the surgeons will, technically it will be easy to open up and repair before the baby becomes a Michelin man few days down the line, which usually happens after ECMO, and the inflammation and the cytokine storm might make the survival worse. So looking at the survival is not everything. Long-term outcomes, 63% of these patients who were weaned from ECMO, had long-term problems. 58% survived to hospital discharge. 37% survived to 1 year or more. And then the favorable markers are higher birth weight, good APGAR scores, antenatal diagnosis, and if you have information before ECMO. And then most of these patients do have chronic lung, GI problems, and neurodevelopmental problems as well. And cost-wise,
do you think that data is up to date? That's the 2004
yeah, from the UK.
paper.
But the thing is, most of this, that's the thing I wanted to say. The caveat to that data is that was from the UK ECMO trial, and before the advances have come up. So that data is probably skewed. If you do that, things will be much better. And then, but cost-wise, the diaphragmatic hernia is the highest median cost of pediatric surgical conditions in the USA. So to summarize, ECMO in CDS is challenging. Risk stratification, patient selection, and MDT collaborative working is key. You need to standardize the management across the hospitals. Lung protective ventilation and assessing cardiac function is essential. And early discussion or instigation of a discussion is the key to good outcomes. And the patient management needs to be tailored to the pathophysiology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Naga. I'm sure we've got some questions.
In terms of the ventilation strategy after birth and so on, the Vichy trial, which was a randomized controlled trial, showed that if you use high-frequency oscillation, more patients ended up on ECMO. What is your thoughts on that?
So one of the things is now we know more and more that cardiac function plays a more role. And as you know, high frequency, if you're going up on the mean airway pressure up and up, and although it's lung protective, maybe the cardiopulmonary interaction is probably pushing them towards the ECMO. So permissive hypercapnia, low, even if you're using high frequency, if you don't go beyond mean airway pressures of 14, it's okay. And that's probably what I think is. And Chris, would you agree with that?
The other thing. you've got to remember that often people use a stepwise approach. So they're all going to be on a conventional ventilator, and when that's not going well, that's when you end up on a high frequency.
True.
And when that's not going well, that's when you end up on ECMO.
Sure.
So
while you're still holding the mic, because you have the expertise of, cannulating these patients as well as repairing them. So whatever evidence I've presented, so I just want you to comment on, or just share your...
I mean, I thought that was a very nice, balanced approach. Often you get people presenting at either one viewpoint or the other and can't see the opposite side. I think it is one of the difficult things, and there is a massive centre variation. I think if you look at the raw numbers, there's even more studies that suggest you should even forget the idea of even going anywhere near a repair while on ECMO, except if you ask the people who did those studies what they do, they said, oh yeah, no, we all repair them on ECMO.
Yeah.
And certainly our finding, if you just get on and do it, then it's done, and you get fairly limited bleeding, and you've removed one of the big unanswerable questions.
Absolutely.
And whether it makes a massive difference, I probably don't think it does. I think there's other things that you've got no control over that ultimately dictate survival. But in certain patients, it does make a difference, especially as one of the case presentations, you had a mechanical problem with the diaphragm hurt. It wasn't just lung hypoplasia.
Exactly.
I remember one we did, again, a right-sided CDH, where everything was going all right, and then the liver torted, and we completely lost all drainage, and we went in, we untwisted the liver, repaired the defect, and yeah, it was a long, difficult run, but that kid survived, and as far as I know, is still alive about 18 years down the line. So yeah, I think if you're doing it, you've got to be aggressive. I think it's one of the neonatal things in ECMO where there is potential benefit to move to maybe 1 or 2 centres rather than, say, in the UK where we've got potentially 10 centres doing ECMO, all doing CDHs. I think with mobile you can funnel them into a couple of expert centres and you might make a difference.
Thank you.
So the Leicester experience at over about 10 repairs a year is a 65 or 68% survival, which is a real testament.
I think, it's great you see the numbers in 70s and 80s. However, they're the centres that actually get, as you've pointed out, the CDHs
absolutely
before, and then you can pick which ones you put on and when you put them on.
That's right.
We're often in a situation where we're getting called in the middle of the night to come and pick up the pieces.
Sure.
And I think that, explains a drop-off in the situation. But no, I don't want half of England's CDHs full stop. I don't mind the ECMO ones,
yes,
but just not all of them.
Couldn't agree more. Right.
Any more questions?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naga. That was a fascinating talk. I would like to ask Dr. Nada Al-Jassim now to come and give us her perspective on ECMO transports. Anybody want to ask anything about? Yeah.
No, we at Leicester were repairing ECMO, congenital diaphragmatic hernia while they were on ECMO. And whenever we were full, and few situations I ended up taking the children to Glasgow. And as you said, institutional preference, and over there they said they always do once they come off ECMO. So is there any point in comparing our figures with the Glasgow figures and see how the mortality rates or survival rates differ?
They're all almost the same. We published our full case series a while ago of about 106 patients, something like that. And Glasgow did theirs. They had about half the numbers, but there wasn't a massive difference in survival. Although I am working on Carl, who's the leader in Glasgow, and he's more interested in finding out how to repair them. I think whilst there is an argument for some patients, if you're getting worse and worse and worse and not doing a repair, it just feels kind of wrong if they don't get it. I mean, the Partridge paper, which said 100% survival in the 16 patients that come off ECMO, that's because they probably weren't as severe. There was also another 15 patients who never got repaired. And if you push the two groups together, those who didn't get repaired on ECMO versus those who got repaired, their survival drops significantly, and it's about the same. But it's about, most patients I think should be repaired on. I think it's easier, and if you leave it to 3 weeks down the line, you're going to get bleeding. It's going to be a nightmare to do.
At some stage, we were doing partial liquid ventilation on these kids. No improvement with that. It doesn't make any difference.
There's 101 questions here. Again, in certain patients it does. So does it grow lungs? I don't think so. Will it help you expand a lung that is consolidated and has been pressed with guts on it for a considerable period? Yes, it might. So it opens up your lungs there, and it may make a difference in certain, but it's not a do-all patients.
Just to add on that, the data out of a randomized controlled trial in CDH using perfluorocarbon run out of Michigan showed they could grow the lungs fast, but they didn't improve the outcomes because the vascular remodeling didn't change. Despite having bigger lungs, they still had bad pulmonary hypertension. Over to you, Dr. Nada. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I guess with the mobile ECMO lecture, a lot has been covered, and that make my task a bit simple. When it comes to ECMO transport, we have to think about it like intra-facility transport when you are moving your patient to CT or for any procedure, versus when you are doing it out of your facility, out of the comfort zone, between centers, or even as retrieval of ECMO. So I will have a bit of just highlights on both. We all know that those patients are taken into as the most unstable, very sick patients, and it's a life-saving condition perhaps if it's retrieval and you're going to get them on the very early stage and put them on ECMO. So transporting the ECMO patients are not the easiest task at all, and many of the ECMO centers has developed transport programs, and it's, I guess, having mobile ECMO team is making the center very much developing with having high volume center. At the same time, it makes the tasks at administration level even more tricky and more difficult for the team. So you train your team to take and handle cases inside the hospital, and then you ask to go out of the comfort zone and get patients from outside, and it's a bit need more training and more experienced people to handle this task. So before I jump into the ECMO retrieval, I have like small 2 stories about the intra-facility ECMO transport, because this is a bit less complicated than the retrieval. And one of them, a child who has been moved from the ICU to the CT scan, and on the CT scan with having the personnel who are briefed for what we are up to, where are we going, and the task for everyone, having the kid carefully moved from the stretcher over to the bed of the CT scan, had all of a sudden high pressures in all lines, and patient was wide awake, agitated, opening eyes while on the CT bed. So it's only the console of the ECMO was putting pressure on the sedation line, and the patient was wide awake. So that is where you have hypoxia and issues and like that, so you need to figure it out quickly. The second case is unfortunate adult patient who has been 4 weeks on ECMO. Again, transferred to the CT scan without a proper coordination, moving the patient fast, cannula was out. That was drastically heavy bleeding on the corridor, and you can imagine how messy, and it's inside the hospital. So is it the same? Probably higher risk, but we'll see. So ECMO retrieval team have a big task to get transport of all the personnel needed and equipment to the referring hospital where they are getting the call, then performing the procedure and doing the cannulation, and then coming back with the patient on ECMO back to the hospital and the ECMO center. So that is one of the patients the last case we had for a pediatrics after being called, doing the cannulation, transporting the patient back on an ambulance, and having the console on the side with the ECMO patient on an ambulance. We don't left the patient behind. The whole team need to be monitoring the patient until you arrive to the unit, until you settle things down and connect the patient to the monitor. That's from adult team, and this is for pediatric team at King Fahd Medical City. So the ways of transporting patient, whether it goes through ground transportation using ambulance or helicopter or the fixed wing aircraft, as you've seen in Chris' presentation, that was great videos and photos, is not carrying the same risk. So each has its own risk and limitations when it comes to occupancy of the personnel, when it comes into the distance, the feasibility to do and manage any complication that could happen during that trip. So I obtained most of the tables from the review articles on 400 patients who were transported on ECMO, just to have a look on the risk of transport of patients on ECMO. There were plenty of pediatric patients from neonate, 68 in one of the review articles, and the other one, 112, no deaths, several side effects. Again, in adults, there are plenty, but for the sake of the course, we're focused with pediatrics and neonates here. For the overall patients, adult and peds, the majority were related to respiratory complication, losing tidal volume. If you are on a good ECMO flows, it wouldn't be a big deal and can be managed. However, second most common were circulatory problems related to bleeding. At very early stage, while you're transporting, you just gave a bolus of heparin and you're moving to the other hospital, that should be managed on the way. The third is equipment-related complications related to cooling and temperature change. And interestingly, like this wouldn't happen in the Gulf, but having frozen lines is interesting for me to have came across that. Anyway, there were no deaths, despite there was a pump failure or a clotting of the oxygenator that was managed by the transport team. But do you think this is going to be as simple as that? Well, the majority of those cases were collected from very experienced high-volume centers. So choosing the proper personnel who are very experienced in handling the ECMO on transport is a key. Okay, so this is just to see how feasible is to transport and looking into the equipment. Different ECMO machines, different feasibility from different companies. Everyone would have some tools to just facilitate transporting on ECMO. That was, I don't think we could open this video, no? Anyway, so I'll just skip that, but you can see a recently released video for Euro also that showed a smaller ECMO machine to transport the machine to patient location for a retrieving case. Same for other machines. They have, as I mentioned, different tools just to show how advanced are ECMO companies and their tools to get things on track for making it easier to retrieve patients without any issues. So it's fine. Okay, so preparing the team. If you remember when we talked about decannulation of ECMO, we were saying double PEM. So briefing the team is very important. So everybody on the same page. It's not like you come from home, we have ECMO transport and that's it. Now we need to have a plan before we move on. The second, important personnel. Well, I have a patient who is pediatric on intra-aortic pump and he is cannulated with ECMO. Am I the best person to go? Well, I don't have experience with intra-aortic pump. Then you're not the right person. You need to have the right person for that patient that fit the needs, especially when it comes into the cannulation. So central cannulation versus peripheral, you need the cannulating physician who is experienced to manage the cannula in a place, experienced ECMO nurse in a transport, or critical ICU nurse that is trained, perfusionist who can do the troubleshooting, and the paramedics. The proper equipment. So it doesn't make sense, as you saw in the previous photo, to have a big, huge machine that doesn't fit on the aircraft. So you have to know where are you going, through what kind of transportation. Take all what you need, having a stand, having the proper equipment, and don't forget the cannulas before you go for putting patient on ECMO, because it happens to us also. And traveling between 2 cities, it's going to be challenging to go back and get cannulas. Medications, again, proper medication. Just assume that you're going to an area that doesn't have everything. So as if you are in the ICU, going to cannulate patient in your hospital, take all things needed, and just make sure that they have a blood bank and they can release whatever you need for your purpose. So again, this is just to show that some machines have made like more feasible for transportation, including the trucks that is specialized for ECMO. Hopefully, we get one soon in the Gulf area. Anyhow, so that's very brief highlights on transport and getting ready to be safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nada. Any questions for Dr. Nada?
It's coming from the west to the center of Saudi Arabia, this question, not to UAE. I have know very well that Nada is doing a great job in the second cluster in Saudi Arabia with regards initiation of mobile ECMO. I guess our colleague in adult have a larger experience than us in pediatric. For you, just to make it in simple words, what is the 2 or 3 major factors can impact back on your mobile ECMO?
Challenges? The challenges in pediatrics will be cannulating physicians on the first go. Maybe not everyone had the same challenge, but we at Saudi Arabia having pediatric surgeons away from doing the cannulation, surgeons who are focused with the congenital heart surgeries, very deeply involved with the congenitals, no big interest in doing ECMOs. It's a growing experience, honestly, for the intensivist, which make people shy off just to put hands on, given the high risk, legal aspects, medico-legal aspects, and the privileges, limitations, and unclarity on that perspective. So you need to be brave enough to go on a mission and say, well, this kid is having high mortality and I'll just go for it, otherwise he will die. Which is, people may just have an argument that, no, he won't die. CO2 is only 140, so it's fine.
I reverse the question now from your recent experience to Chris' experience about how he can face these challenges earlier in his transport for pediatric ECMO.
Hello, that's working better. We were in the unique situation, or not unique, but the lucky situation of already having a very established ECMO program, which had been functioning for over 20 years. So all the sort of logistical things of cannulation, of who was going to do it, of patient management was off pat. All we had to do was take that into the ambulance environment, and it made life easier. I wouldn't like to be trying to set up a program and set up mobile ECMO from scratch. I think that would be very demanding.
We had Richard Firmin, basically, who was Mr. ECMO UK and a cardiac surgeon. And he was the driving force behind bringing ECMO to the UK. And he could cannulate neonates spectacularly quickly. I know Chris is quick, but I think Richard Fomin is also very quick.
I think I could take him in a race. It doesn't have to be, but you get more options that way. You've got the full gamut, and if anything goes wrong, you've got backup. Whereas if you're going out as the intensivist, you'll probably be all right. But it's the what ifs and maybes that you know your friendly surgeon
Some
will
kind of
help you
adding
with.
power to your team? Or?
Yeah.
So the question is going now to Mark and Salman. So you guys are now moving this project back to Abu Dhabi, and I just spoke with Mark a night ago, and he told me about the most away distance is 3 hours driving. So where you are hitting so far, and what do you think about having the surgical in the field or just with intensivist?
Hot topic. This is a very, very hot topic. We have our surgical team with us today. Alexander's not here right now, but worldwide, the surgical expertise for this neck cannulation in infants is not only cardiac surgeons. There's a number of general surgeons who do it very well. The team in Glasgow is led by a general surgeon. So we don't have to be exclusive about this, and we have a senior general surgeon in Abu Dhabi who has done, in fact, in Glasgow with Carl Davis, has done a number of neck cannulations in the past. There are pressures on our system right now. Our cardiac surgical service has gone through a transformation in the last year and complete change in personnel. And to ask them to take on extra work at this stage is both, you know, tempting rejection and also inadvisable. So we need to plan the next step. We've got Chris doing a masterclass with the team this afternoon. We're going to build up the expertise and the resource before we expose them to the extra burden of doing this. It has to be planned. In the meantime, we do our very best, and we'll support children on a case-by-case basis, try and move them before they need cannulation. And I have an ace in the hole, a Lionel Messi in the team. Juan Pablo, whom I hope I'm not going to embarrass him too much, has had experience in Buenos Aires of 30-odd babies. So I'm very glad that he's part of the team, and privileging him and getting the team to the point where he can be released to do these cannulations is one prospect, one potential way forward. Dr. Salman?
So with the start of the program now, we have kind of random referrals, not in an organized fashion, honestly, through probably SKMC or to Cleveland Clinic. We are exchanging the calls in between, which is not the appropriate procedure. That's why we are coordinating the consultations through the MERC, which is the Medical Emergency Call Center. I believe strongly that there is no excuse for us, since we have an active program now with future vision. One reversible case of respiratory failure or circulatory failure, a neonate or a child to die. So we are sitting, more intensive meetings on emergency base to discuss these issues, and I had the discussion with the pediatric team to establish or to compose the best surgical team supported by the intensivist in order to start the retrieval. So probably we are going to improve our experience with the retrieval after 1 or 10 cases, and then forward, probably the intensivists, they will have a better space that they feel more comfortable to go alone. So it's a shared area between surgeons and intensivists. I looked at all logistics. I cannot talk about it now, but hopefully, even including the transportation, we will establish the best ECMO transportation methodology here in Abu Dhabi. So we'll move now from the ECMO business before we go to the break, right? So I have non-ECMO question for you. Where is Missy? You will escape if he got the World Cup, okay?
Finding about the point of echo in the PICU, they will come and do this fancy machine with the echo machine, and they tell you your finding is like not clear. This is a proper echo finding, and you should not do it unless you call us. We'll not take your finding in consideration. So, in terms of the surgeon, I think we have a lot of surgeons here. How comfortable to delegate this mission to the intensivist?
If I'm not a surgeon, but I'm going to try and answer the question. The proportion of neonates being supported for respiratory failure by non-surgical access is slowly increasing. There's a group in Genoa, Moscatelli, who are starting to put in double lumen cannulae into 3-kilo babies. They published a series of 25 with good outcomes and no major adverse events, including diaphragms being supported VV with double lumen. So I'd like to invite Dr. Moscatelli to come here to our next workshop and work with us, and that way we can take some of the load off the surgical team. But this is a two-way street. Perhaps I can ask Dr. Juan what he feels about the job satisfaction as a surgeon that you get from putting a respiratory case on ECMO and seeing them go out of the unit a few days later.
Sorry, my English.
Do you enjoy the job of cannulating neonates for ECMO? Yeah.
Yes, I like. We used to do that. Sorry, my English is very bad. I am learning. We used to do that in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, in the Garrahan Hospital.
He's Argentinian, all right.
Here's my Messi. This is my Messi.
I like this job, but okay, I think that we are a team. We need to, I don't know, we need to organize better that, no? We need a good team for support that project.
Sure, so you are winning, okay? So you have more support from surgeons, cardiologists, administrative, and I hope that this program will start and shine in the future.
One more comment, I think. We've got one from Suneel, and then Dr. Adib wants to have another word. No?
Adib, having set up the program in India at Krishna Institute of Medical Sciences in Hyderabad, it all depends on having a collaborative team, having an understanding with the pediatric cardiac surgeon, cardiac intensivist. We're all one team, so with the mutual understanding, it would be possible. And again, at our ECMO training programs, compared to these numbers, because of the size of the India, I apologize, in each and every training program, we tend to have up to 75 candidates going through the training course, simulation course, everything together. We need those sort of numbers over there as well. And many of the attendees are from different disciplines, from cardiac surgeons, cardiologists, pulmonologists, some of the nephrologists, etc., intensivists, nurses, critical care nurses, etc. So it is multiple disciplines. ECMO is always a collaborative job. We cannot do it alone. We are together in dealing with that. If personnel are available at different centers, we have entered into this arena transporting the equipment by using drones. It is being done currently at this stage as well. Maybe in future that would be much more easily available. Currently we are transporting resuscitation equipment by drones in India. it is from Vinay Navdakarni. He was the leading force from US.
So, bottom line, ECMO team is like football team. 11 players are not all of them are goalkeepers. There's midfielders, defenders, attacks, wingers, right? And that's the way it should be. Everyone has a assigned job. Same thing for ECMO team. Intensivists, surgeons, perfusionists, respiratory therapists, ECMO nurses, and the other supportive medical personnel. So just think wide or think big also, and dream big as well, and things will happen.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to share a few thoughts on long ECMO.
One more talk?
One more, yes.
Okay.
Quick one.
All right.
It features teamwork. Features strongly on teamwork. Some good stories in this. I'm going to look at some perceptions of long ECMO runs, highlight a couple of cases, and we'll finish up quickly and go to lunch. So this was a survey done through EuroELSO with LaRusso and his group, and Donato, who did this. Perceptions of what is a long run varied. So 14 to 21, 21 to 28, 28 plus. The most common cause of a long run was a bridge to recovery or transplantation. That's an increasing use in this long run group. Awake on ECMO was reported in 1/3 of centres. This is 94 centres in EuroELSO. And futility as a reason to withdraw was accepted in 65%. Still, a significant group could not do that. So that's interesting. And there were, yes, large differences about how ECMO was managed were still noted. And this is a fairly recent survey in 2019. Diaphragms, we've had a lot of talk about diaphragms. We don't need to look at that. Tracheostomy in ECMO patients, we don't tend to do that in small children. We try and avoid it because of the trauma to the airway. Anyway, so the bottom line, tracheostomy, uncommon. 1 in 4 patients received a trach, had surgical site bleeding, so it's not without complications. We'll take you through this story of an 8-year-old who came to us with no significant past medical history with ARDS. Her inflammatory markers showed high CRP, she was culture negative, and she was also thrombocytopenic. She was cannulated fem-jug, and Bali will remember this case because he put her on with me. One of us rewired the groin, and then Bali put the neck cannula in. We went on, and we started normal protocol steroids on day 5, proning the patient, and still by day 14, we had no real improvement. Those were the x-rays at cannulation and on day 15. So we thought what might be going on, and Dr. Kesava will remember this one, because there was a suggestion on the CT report from the referring center that this patient had vasculitic changes on the cerebral CT scan. So when we remembered that, or Dr. Kesava remembered that, we got some autoantibody tests done, and we involved the rheumatologist, and she turned out to have SLE. So subsequently, gradually improved, and we were able to decannulate, and this is her post-decannulation with the team. She's still trached at this point. This was a case that required tracheostomy, and then she was decannulated. I think there's a lot of people here in that photograph. Do you recognize this face down here? Jennifer? Sunita? Tricia? No, Tricia couldn't be in there. Okay. That's nice to share a good result with the team. This second case was more recent, a transposition case. that went for surgery and then coming off bypass had poor function, convened a quick MDT, decided to go on rather than stress the baby out. Went straight to cath lab for a coronary angiography and had normal coronaries. Lots of bleeding, activated factor 7 on the first day without clotting the circuit, but did control the bleeding. Big tension pneumothorax on day 3, re-exploration showing that the lungs had bully all over them. And we were advised to rest the lung completely at that point, so we disconnected from the ventilator for 48 hours. Turned out there was massive infection, mediastinitis. So the decision was made to close the chest, because this was an open chest cannulation, and convert to peripheral VA. We did that, and then we got hemolysis. Immediately, with a new circuit and new cannula, we got hemolysis, which worsened over the course of 5 days to the point where we lost the color change on the oxygenator because of methemoglobinemia, which is one of the side effects of hemolysis. Just briefly talk about hemolysis. It's multifactorial. This is Dalton's paper. If you even if you change out the circuit, you still be left with a significant amount of circulating plasma-free hemoglobin, and plasma exchange is a way to get rid of it. This is a paper, thanks to Dr. Nada for giving me this, that if you are in a center that doesn't have the luxury of monitoring plasma-free hemoglobin, you can use carboxy hemoglobin, which comes on most blood gas analyzers. And this group from Hong Kong showed that carboxy hemoglobin above 3 was associated with significant hemolysis as an early marker for this problem. So this patient, having had already a couple of significant complications, then managed to have a hemothorax, which actually helped him. The lungs were in such bad shape that when we closed the chest and he bled out a significant amount through the chest drains, again needing factor 7, one of the benefits was that the air leak, which had been dogging him, was much improved after this. So we had a improving picture, and we managed to decannulate on day 30. And these were the lungs actually post-decannulation. You can see there's still lots of holes, and this is actually a bronchopleural fistula track from the left main bronchus into the pleura. So because we'd noticed that hemothorax helped him the first time, we blood patched this baby with 35 mils of autologous blood, and it sealed the bronchopleural fistula. And we managed to extubate him a couple of days after that. That was his X-ray. So that baby managed to escape with a good result. Baby Neville. Another good outcome. So I think I'll leave it there, actually, and we can break for lunch. Thank you very much. Any questions before we go? No, I think that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Same conference call where everybody is actually listening to the referral. Of course, one person is also taking everything down. The referral hospital on the line about this patient, is the patient to accept the patient for ICU, ECMO, or whatever. So there are that discussion so that there is sometimes consultation basically means consultation. The next one, of course, you also have to, because now we need to get connected. So no problem. So always they leave the connector there. They're missing the patient. If there is no patient, you missing the patient. This one is no worries. This is the
or another one, if you take post-oxy blood gas and you flush it with your saline with air. That's why I was telling the technique of bubbles out. What else? What other reasons can cause a hair disappear? Accessing this can not cause hair. Accessing this can push. If you push it, right? So this can cause hair. Once you have air, what is the first thing you do? So how do you, let's say we are...
The only time, if we're doing double lumen cannulas for VV support, but I think the plan is that's going to fall within largely the intensive care remit to have a go with dependency from people, we take patients that have maybe already been cannulated a number of centres across the UK, that they'll get an 8 arterial cannula in and then spend an hour trying to get a 12 or even with a centrifugal pump. It's equally weighted to the size of your return and the size of your drainage. So there's no point if you've only got a 10 arterial or a 10 venous in, putting a 12.
Neonatal. For me, it was a surprise here. We have a lot of patients with a low weight, 2.2, 2.3, 2.5. Some of them with ZEPA.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because in my practice we have the same course in my country and a lot of experience there. We had bigger patients because it's the more you need to do.
Yeah.
It won't be like this when it comes to blood, okay? It's not that simple. Blood is important. Pre-osmosis. This is when we take pre-osmosis samples.
What's wrong with the
postpartum? By the machine. And where you can get arterial air on the arterial limb. Very good. If you take most of some blood gas and then you inject a flash of saline, and then the saline is with air, it's actually going to the arterial.
Just one of diffusions. So we took some excursions to this compartment without diffusions because there wasn't anybody there. So it's absolutely required that diffusion is as good. But if this administration is confident enough, I can handle it, then you can
till the time the doctor can be on. And something to be at so that it should be in the green age so that we have adequate oxygen available. That is one. And some minor points like you can minimize the time if you have planned very well with the other team. Like you said, you just don't walk into the CT just like that. Make sure that that particular thing is not routinely comfortable with. Minimal things we won't do the safe transfer.
And if it's not floating, if this is not floating, then give it back to the
Back to the team. Now, essentially it's a baby. Okay? It's a baby.
Now.
We're almost ready to draw things to a close. Before we, our VIP is in transit, apparently. So before he arrives and we can hand out the trophies, etc., and the certificates, I'd just like to acknowledge the help I've had with doing this workshop. First off, the support of Dr. Salman and Dr. Saleh from DOH, who are our principal sponsors. And from Saha, Marwan is here somewhere, and his boss who's coming is Dr. Ghanem, so I'd like to thank them for supporting us. From SKMC, Dr. Micah, thank you very much. What did you do? A lot to support our ECMO program is the short answer. Drizia wouldn't be sitting here without you, our main asset. So thanks also to Drizia, who's been a real help organizing this. And my faculty from SKMC, Dr. Shalabi, Dr. Naga, Dr. Balaj, Sunita, Bindu, Marlene, and Dios, Dado. Thank you all. I'd like to, sorry, to cut their applause short. Let's have a bit more applause for them, actually. And the Burjeel team, thank you so much, Dr. Kesava, for your help with the scientific side. And Jennifer and Mahmoud. Mahmoud provided half the cannulation gear, so, and Jennifer, as always, a stalwart in the education of ECMO. Thank you very much, both of you. Let me think who else I need to thank. I need to thank Kosti and Coca most especially for all her hard work from Eurolink. Let me see, who else? I think that's about it. Xenios, oh yes, from Xenios, our industry partners, thank you very much for your support. Thank you. Yes, guest speakers. Dr. Chris, wherever he is, all the way from the UK, thank you so much. It's made our workshop to have you here. And also Dr. Nada and Dr. Adib, thank you very much for coming this way. Oh, sorry, Ravi. Apologies, yes. And I mentioned, did I mention Selva? No, I didn't. Selva. Yes, hooray, big up for Selva. And Gopi and our other perfusion colleague from Xenios at the back. Thank you. So that's it for my thank yous. I think we should probably proceed now because Dr. Ghanem doesn't appear to have made it. So shall we appear with a... Yes, I'll ask Marwan to join us, yeah. Also, I'd like to thank Dr. Suneel, who doesn't appear to be here, but he came all the way over.
We are reaching to the conclusion. Dr. Ghanem Al-Hassani, the director of education, is stuck in the traffic, so we are going to start. First of all, we had joyful days with you here, okay? And actually, if I have the power to keep you on hold and not to leave, I will make it, all right? Well, so all are having commitments, so thank you very much for, interrupting your National Day holiday to come for a very important academic activity and attend with us. This is a great opportunity to upskill your practice and knowledge of ECMO, especially in pediatrics and neonates. And this is the first time it's happening in the Middle East. I was talking with Dr. Mike Schumacher. So second time you are meeting together in 10 years, which I'm so grateful of. So how was it? You like it? Are you happy? Oh, nice. So you are not allowed to leave. All right. So first of all, I would like to thank the CPER, Dr. Saleh bin Faris Al-Ali, for his support to this educational workshop. I would like also to thank the Saha Corporation and SKMC for organizing this event. Dr. Mark and his team, other colleagues from Burjeel, from external speakers from UK, from Saudi Arabia, and also the great support from Xenios company for having full dedication to support and also to attend with us in the activity. So this is, we are reaching to the end of year 2022. In 2023, we are having a very busy program. If you are, having your connections, you want to invite your friends for joining the coming courses. We are having pediatric ECMO courses, and we have also basic and advanced adult ECMO courses in 2023. We have the big event, which is the ECMO conference in May 2023 as well. And we are going to have a lot of international speakers from the East, Middle East, and the West for the first time. So this is kind of small ELSO conference. We are not competing with them again, but we are bridging with them actually to spread knowledge. So first of all, I would like to award all those who were supporting this event. And I'm gonna start first with, I'll start with industrial companies support. So Xenius team, please. Okay, fine. Yeah, thank you. So this is for you. So all Xenius team, welcome. حياكم تفضلوا. Yeah, this is also for you. So this is a memorial trophy for the ECMO workshop. Thank you. One more clap.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
So we'll see you in the next versions of ECMO workshops. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So there was someone was working, for probably 2 to 3 months preparing for this workshop, and I'm grateful that probably I made him so busy for the preparations, and I'm so sorry about my stressful calls for him. So Dr. Mark, thank you very much. And this is one more trophy for you. You deserve a promotion. Just leave it later on, yeah. Dr. Kizafa. And this is a memorial trophy for you as well. So I hope that you will sleep tonight. Just because you'll continue having happiness, all right? So we had expert speakers who anticipated from the first moment of our communication that he is ready to come and help. And we cannot get some kind of, positive response like this, okay? And he came direct from UK to here. Dr. Chris, welcome. All right, this is for you. Actually, you have.
Thank you for the invite. It's been good fun, and thank you for all at least listening.
Okay, so another gentleman from Saudi Arabia who was also keen to help, and his message to me is that Emirates and Saudi Arabia are one country. And this is a lovely response from him. Dr. Adib, welcome, please. Adib is in Arabic, as they are specialized in Arabic language, all right? But he's Adib.
I would say to the organizer and attendees, it was like a family workshop rather than official workshop. Everyone is comfortable, willing to learn, willing to teach. It was a very nice. I just told Mark today, I told that number 6, not number 1. Well done, thank you guys.
Okay, and we had one of the most, young generation ICU consultants who had, very clear thumbprints in Saudi Arabia. She started, her, anticipation to the ECMO program in Saudi Arabia so quickly, and we are appreciating her input in every case that she is consulted in Saudi Arabia. So we are extending our collaboration with her for our training now and further. Dr. Nada Al-Jassim.
I'm sure we keep forgetting that.
This is for you, not for me.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be around, and it's one of the best workshops I have worked on. And honestly, I would love to be around every now and then just to have such, I miss this environment where people are really exchanging knowledge, experience, very motivated, keep me reading even up to the night, and it was a great experience, honestly, and I really would like to thank you for inviting me to the to this, and thanks for your support all the way. Thank you.
This is my personal opinion, okay? So I usually like, to get, this is even during residency program and fellowship program, we usually nominate the best doctor or best consultant in the department, right? So if you allow me, all right, to nominate the best speaker in this event. So, I'm okay? Okay. Dr. Naga.
Thank you very much. That's very
This is for you.
I know that it's been, that's very kind. It's been a real pleasure to meet so many people. And thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure to teach on this workshop. Well done. Thank you.
There are also strong soldiers behind this workshop, okay? The ECMO nurses and the ECMO perfusionists, right? So she came direct from Kuwait to here, okay? We were hearing her name, and Dr. Huda Al-Fodri was saying, you stole her from us, all right? And I said, I don't know what you are talking about, but actually, first meeting was just quite weeks before, and she did, the ECMO workshop for the adults in SKMC. And now she's participating in the pediatric version of Abu Dhabi ECMO workshop. You are working hard. I usually, when I post anything about ECMO and LinkedIn, she's the one firstly to like my comments, Okay, Dricia, welcome.
Thank you.
So there is another soldier who had, promised to continue with the adult ECMO program in SKMC. So actually, he had, positive energy boosting, okay, to the ICU, and he contributed to save many lives, whether during the COVID-19 or after that. He's an add-on for our ECMO group here, actually. And he has a very good future vision to the group. And he's now holding the education committee with Dr. Praveen. He's going to be the scientific chair for the ECMO conference, next version. Dr. Mohammed Shalabi. So we have many superstars here, okay? Sunita. Bindo. Thank you very much. Marlene. Yeah, thank you for your help. Sorry for the spelling, okay? So, Diosdado. He came from Saudi Arabia, and he was one of the senior pediatric ICU nurses. Actually, I met him by coincidence, and I connected with my group in London, Ontario, Canada, and we shared the photo, and they said, oh, he's our friend, and he's from the same group, okay? So he's one of the expert nurses in ECMO and pediatric ICU. Mr. Mahmoud. So we have another soldier, Jennifer.
More like a general. More like a general.
Yeah. Okay, so another newcomer from the Asian Pacific countries. So I went to Asian Pacific Cardiac Society meeting, met most of the big figures there in cardiology. And one of them was Ram Ramantha. He's a famous cardiac intensivist and a cardiac surgeon. And there's a lot of contributions to the ECMO and research as well. So the first moment, and he's based in Singapore actually, the first minute I met Ravi, I said to him, where are you from? He says, from Singapore. Do you know Ravi? And I said, he's my consultant. I said, okay, you are one of the group now, directly. So welcome, Mr. Ravi. Yeah. Okay, Salva Kumar. Balaz. Okay, so, you know, congratulations for all of you. Being in ECMO, as a practitioners, you should show up full dedication to the patient and to the program. You'll be 100% hardworking in your field. And I'm sure that you will be lucky that you will not be able to sleep adequately because of the ECMO business. But I'm sure that you'll save lives and you'll feel the effort is rewarding once you have your patients alive and all the family are so happy, especially when it is related to kids, right? Adults, maybe we feel, you know, sometimes sad, but later on we are to the norm. But it's totally different when you are touching the lives of pediatrics. You are taking care of our kids, and I'm sure that you are to the level of responsibilities toward this commitment. Last minute is want to take a group photo all together, and just I welcome you here, please.
For those of you who need CME certificates, I think we can help out. Many of you should be applying on the TAM system, but those who are from abroad, we can help out with CME certificates. Correct? Yes, we have some printed.
They have to apply to the TAM as well by their passport, and they will get this certificate.
Oh, okay. So
we will be in touch with you.
We'll support you to do that.
Yeah.